What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 592. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, you ready to do some rare and mythic rare review action today?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I am still riding the high from last weekend where I went 9-3 in the Rivals League. And I did it in the best way possible. This is the dream. I got to play a Sultai Ultimatum deck in Historic. I know you watched a lot of those matches, Marshall.
I did. It was insane.
I got to cast Emergent Ultimatum, getting a Scholar of the Lost Trove, Omniscience, and Final Parting. And they were forced to give you Omniscience. I also hard cast Omniscience twice in the tournament, and yeah, went 6-0 in the Historic portion. It was just, I have not had much more fun playing Magic in a long time, because not only was I winning, which is always fun, I was doing it with a deck that was just an absolute joy to play.
Yeah, so cool. And it did like stuff that you're just not supposed to do at the professional Magic scene, right? Like the Omniscience plays and, you know, copying all this stuff and just completely going off. It was super fun to watch, and super good job, man. 9-3. That puts you right back up near the top there and in contention as the season starts to wind down. There's what, 2 more league weekends?
Yeah, there's 2 more league weekends, plus I think the Strixhaven set championship, though it's possible that there's more, another championship. I don't really know the full thing, but I'm currently in 3rd in the league, and there's 3 spots up for grabs for the top prize, which is advancement to MPL and a World's qualification, which is of course what I'm hoping to see. That's
right where you want to be. Well, great job on the weekend, and hopefully you can keep that up. Focusing back on the show here, we've got the rare and mythic rare and apparently mystical archive set review lined up for today, and we're going to be going over all of those cards. Before we get into it, though, let's mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com, with their sweet new look over there at Channel Fireball. And yeah, they've got a whole lot going on. Of course, if you're wanting to get your hands on some Strixhaven, you can do so. You can head over to Channel Fireball and pre-order your Strixhaven. You know, you can order it any way that suits your play style or your needs with regards to boxes or singles or even cases or crates or anything like that. Whatever it is that you want, you can head over to Channel Fireball. And once they're able to ship out that Strixhaven product to you, you know, once they're allowed to, they will do so straight away. And of course, you know, quick shipping has always been one of the hallmarks of Channel Fireball. Also should mention that, you know, there's a pre-release party coming up on the weekend for Strixhaven. And I'm going to be one of the college people for Quandrix over there as well. So we're going to play some sealed against a bunch of people. And there's information actually on, it happens to be on Channel Fireball on the front, but there's also, you can go to strixhavenparty.com and find out information if you want to hang out with me while I explore the new set there. If you'd like to support the show directly, patreon.com/limited resources is a place to go. You know, it's just a place to give back to the content creators that help you at Magic in this case, hopefully, or, make your day a little better, whatever it is. You can find hopefully your favorite content creators on Patreon, and you can support them. And we've been on there for a long time. It's fully transparent, and you can adjust it to whatever suits you at the time. And we do appreciate each and every one of you for doing so. Luis, grading scale overview. We're going to be giving grades to these cards.
Yeah, and before we hop in, we're going to do rares, mythic rares, and the mystical archives. That is our plan. We're gonna see on the timing. I know you've got your prior commitments. I think Marshall's he's gonna pie eating contest or something a little bit later today. So we'll get to those today, and we're gonna use the following grades. A's are bombs, game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, and the best cards on the set. This is the rare and mythic review. You're gonna see more A's than you do in the commons. B's are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. In this case, your colleges. They're this is the Quandrix card that makes you want to draft Quandrix. These are solid removal spells, headliners for the set, go-to cards. So examples of A's, by the way, were like Coma, Starnheim Unleashed, Asika's Chariot. Some B's would be things like Poison the Cup, Agar, Spirit of the Alder Guard. Cards that you're generally pretty happy to take a B first pick. That's kind of the dividing line. C's are playable. These are the pawns of limited, and you're not going to see too many of these in the rare and mythic set review. Rares tend to cluster at the top and bottom of the spectrum. These are cards like Baskir Shield Mage, Grizzled Outrider, and Augury Raven. These are sometimes playable, but you'd prefer not to run them. These are cards you're fairly unhappy if they end up, taking place in your deck. Cards like Draugr Thought Thief or Death Knell Berserker. Fs are unplayable in virtually all scenarios. Incredibly narrow cards or cards with super high mana costs. Cards like Dogged Pursuit, Tybalt's Trickery. And then we have two subcategories, sideboard, which are cards you wouldn't play in the main deck but do make the cut after board. They're not very frequently found in the rare category, though Mystical Archive certainly has some. And then build around, cards that don't do much on their own, but when you do build around them, can be very, very effective.
There you go. So with that, let's get into the cards here. We're going to start with there's two colorless cards, actually, a mythic rare and a rare. The first one is called Mascot Exhibition. It's a mythic sorcery lesson. It costs 7 mana, and you get a 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying, a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token, and a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So the three types of tokens that we saw represented from those three colleges, you get one of each, but it's a lesson. You can search this up if you have enough learning going on in your deck. That's powerful.
Yeah, this card has kind of two different things going on, and they're both pretty appealing. The first is that it's a powerful 7 mana card, right? You cast this for 7 mana, and you end up in a spot where you're probably going to be ahead on board, if not very far ahead on board. Mm-hmm. But the most intriguing part, because it's not just that, is you get access to this card many other cards because it's a lesson. It's because I would fall short of calling this a bomb. This is a good card to cast for 7 mana, not quite a bomb, but it's also a card that you maybe have 3 or 4 or more cards in your deck that can pull it out for you out of your sideboard. So all of a sudden, you can reliably cast this once you get to 7 mana, and being able to build your deck such that every time you hit 7, you have a really good card to cast on 7. That's really valuable. And that's what makes this not only a good card, but I think a card that I would strive to build around.
I would too. It reminds me of the companions a little bit, where it's like the dynamic changes if you, in this case, not always have access to it, but if you've got, say, 2 to 5 learn cards in your deck, you're going to have a really good shot by the time you can actually cast this of having it in your hand most of the time. And that's a game changer. It doesn't even have to be that great to make the cut. And this is really solid. Like you said, it's not quite bomb level territory, but it shores up a board state right quick. So I would be very high on Mascot Exhibition. I mean, I'd be first picking this card and just trying to jam a few random learn cards just because it's not free, but you're kind of getting it for free.
And the biggest part for me is that I would be leaning towards playing something like Quandrix with good ramp. The fact that when you hit 7, you're going to have this in your hand probably 80% of the time if you've built around it and have 4 or 5 learn cards. Mm-hmm. That's so much consistency. So I would give Mascot Exhibition probably an A-, just because of how much power and consistency it adds to your deck.
Yeah, I was just going to give it an A. Like I want, if I can have this in my sideboard, I want it every single time, no matter what. I first pick it to get to that point. The other colorless card is called Wandering Archaic. It's a 5 mana 4/4 avatar at rare. And it says whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, they may pay 2. If they don't, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. It's also a double face card. So on the other side, it's,
technically,
is it not? It's Explore the Vastlands.
Why don't you go ahead and read Explore the Vastlands tell me if this is a double-faced card.
All right. So the other side is a sorcery called Explore the Vastlands, which is 3 mana. Each player looks at the top 5 cards of their library, reveals a land card and or instant or sorcery card from among them, then puts the cards they revealed this way into their hand and the rest on the bottom of their library in a random order. Each player gains 3 life. Yeah, no, I'm not. This isn't a party where you get to come over and eat all my pizza and I pay for it. Like I'm interested in Wandering Archaic though.
Yes, Wandering Archaic is quite good. Effectively, it's a 5 mana 4/4 that makes all their instants and sorceries cost 2 more mana. It's not exactly that, of course, because they do have the option of not paying. Like they don't have to pay for it, but it is still very, very strong. Imagine you have this and they have like a card draw spell or a removal spell. They basically can't play it without paying an additional 2.
Right.
And given that that's the case, you're going to end up in a really good position if you just cast this, and it's going to be very annoying for your opponent. So I think Wandering Archaic, even if you basically should never cast the backside of the card, I would give Wandering Archaic a B+, just as a 5 mana 4/4 that messes with their spells very nicely.
Yeah, B+ for Wandering Archaic. Those are the two colorless cards. That brings us to white. The first one is a lesson. It's a sorcery lesson at Rare called Academic Probation. It's 1 and a white, and it says choose one. It's a modal card. So you have two choices. One, choose a non-land card name. Opponents can't cast spells with the chosen name until your next turn. So that's the rest of this turn, all of their turn, and then when it's back to you is when they can finally do it again. And then the other one is choose target non-land permanent until your next turn. It can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated.
So clearly, without the lesson part, this card is abysmal.
Terrible.
You can't really spend an entire card to delay one of their cards by a turn if you even know what they have in hand, which you probably don't, or even in the best case scenario, lock down one of their creatures for a turn. But the fact that it's a lesson makes you think, okay, how valuable is it to be able to pull target creature can't do anything for a turn out of my sideboard? And my answer is still not very valuable. Like, yes, it doesn't cost you much having this in your board, of course, but it's like a D-level card that, sure, if you've got nothing in the pack that's playable or nothing you think you're going to play, then you can take this and it's okay. But it's not a card that I'm actively aiming to have in my deck, not by any stretch.
Yeah, because you have to also remember that you're likely to have other lessons. So this is going to be, you're going to be taking this over whatever other lessons that you have. And there's much, much better ones at lower rarity. So I like, D for Academic Probation. I wouldn't assume that we'll play this really ever. I mean, just as like I have a random lesson and I cast a learn card. Sure, I'll take it for free, but otherwise, no. Devastating Mastery is next. It's 2 white. So 4 white mana symbols plus 2 sorcery, as a rare. It says you may pay 2 white rather than pay this spell's mana cost. I like that deal. If you did, an opponent chooses up to 2 non-land permanents they control and returns them to their owner's hand. So what does this thing do? It destroys all non-land permanents. So they get to save their 2 best things if you pay 2 white instead of the 2 white for it. I'm less interested in the discount.
Right. So again, this is a card that, like Wand and Archaic, offers you a choice, but it's kind of a false choice. And what I mean by that is you just are not going to cast this for the 2 white cost. If you do, it's just not going to work out well for you. So I wouldn't look at this as a card like, oh, it's a Wrath that you can cast for 4 mana. Well, no, because if you cast it for 4 mana, you're not winning that game. You do this because you're losing, and it'll delay you losing, but it certainly won't win you the game. So how much do we like 2 and quad white Wrath? The answer is I don't. I think this card is pretty close to an F, actually, because one of the strengths of Wraths is that you get to set them up, maybe slow play a creature or 2 and play it. This doesn't let you do that at 6 mana. 6 mana is so much. And then the other thing is it costs quad white. So sometimes you'll top deck your Wrath and have 3 planes in play and be like, oh, wait, this didn't actually work. So I'm just going to give Devastating Mastery an F. I don't think you should be trying to make this card work.
It's effectively uncastable. It gets an F. Next is Elite Spellbinder. This is Paulo's card for winning worlds. It's 2 and a white for a 3/1 flying human cleric at rare. It says when Elite Spellbinder enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell cast this way costs 2 more to cast.
So
3/1 flyer for
3. 3/1 flyer, which is obviously great, right? Like you're going to be really happy playing that regardless. That's just a good card. And then it messes with their hand. It makes one of their spells it costs 2 more. So you can throw them off their curve. You play this turn 3 and they only have 1 3-drop and you Elite Spellbind it. That puts them in a kind of big world of hurt, and also lets you look at their entire hand. So it's a great card. I would say Elite Spellbinder.
B.
I would give this a B plus.
B plus.
I think you're almost always going to take this when you see it, and not just because it's a very flattering picture of Paulo.
Did you hear that he said, "Can you make me skinnier?"
Well, given that when we made a token of Paulo, he gave the artist for our token artist the same feedback, then yes.
He said he was very happy because they air quotes fixed it and made his face skinnier.
You know what I love about it is Paulo is just as open as it gets about it. Like he has no shame, and I think that is actually like I find
he went on
impressive.
a video and said it. So yeah. All right. So B plus for Elite Spellbinder though.
Yeah, I think B plus on Elite Spellbinder.
Leonin Lightscribe is next. It's 1 and a white for a 2/2 cat cleric at rare. It's got Magecraft whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell. And in this case, it says creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn.
Great card.
That's
2
a
mana,
nice
2/2
little bear there.
that has a significant amount of upside is exactly where I want to be. And Leonin Lightscribe, one of the things, especially as I've spent a lot more time looking at the set to come out since the last show we did, is Magecraft's actually a lot smaller of part of the field in terms of the set than I think we were kind of thinking about it when we were looking at these Magecraft cards.
It's on quite a few cards. I mean, it feels like they wanted it to be a thing.
It's a thing, but I don't think it's like a huge thing. It's not as big as like Lessons, for example, is going to be much larger. But I still think that Leonin Lightscribe is the kind of card that will push Magecraft. If you have this card, you are looking to play all the little cantrips and whatnot. So
yeah.
I would give Leonin Lightscribe a B+. It still requires you to go wide, still requires you to have a lot of spells. There's a bit of a conflict there, but it's an excellent card if you get all those things together.
Yeah, I like B+ for it. Extremely scary card to be part of any curve out as well. If they play this on 2, something on 3, something on 4, like you are never blocking in a happy way. All right, next is Mavinda, Student's Advocate. This is 2 and a white for a 2/3 legendary bird advisor at Mythic Rare with flying. So your baseline's already pretty good. It has a lot of text though. You can pay 0 mana, which did they do that? I thought that they got rid of that. Anyway, you can pay 0 mana, and if you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard this turn. If that spell doesn't target a creature you control, it costs 8 more to cast this way. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead, and you can only activate the ability once per turn.
And note that you have to, as they put in the reminder text, you have to pay for the spell. Mm-hmm. And it also, the timing rules still apply. You can only play sorceries when you can play sorcery. So This is a 3 mana 2/3 flyer that works with pump spells. Though the secret thing is it works with fight spells. Because it doesn't say that it can't target their stuff, just that it has to target one of your own things. So if you can end up in a spot where you've got fight spells in your deck, that would be pretty sweet. The white-green's not a supported color pair, so it's going to be that part's going to be tricky. But still, a 3 mana 2/3 flyer that lets you replay all your pump spells, that's quite good.
Yeah.
I mean, this card's going to be a beating. Plus, I mean, don't tell me you don't have dreams of black-white controls starting to replay kill spells for 10 mana.
12 mana. Totally. They say that like how much you like something is often predicated on how much you had to give up to get it, like money or work or whatever. Hey, tack on 8 mana. That kill spell is going to feel real nice. Interestingly, this card ends up. What's that?
Oh, nothing. Go ahead.
Oh God, I didn't hear what you said. I'm sure everybody else did. This is like an aggro card, right? It's kind of funny because you wouldn't think so, but it's just like it's ready to beat down 2/3 flyer. They get your pump spells back.
Yeah, I would give Mavinda. I think that she, if you build around her, like she's a build around, I think to a degree. It's tricky. You should play this card in any white deck.
Right.
2 and a white for a 2/3 flyer. No other text is a good card.
Yeah.
So I think, but I think as a build around, like I would give her close to like an A-, because if you have 3 or 4 pump spells in your deck, this card becomes obscene because you don't even have to use it. The old threat of activation cherry gets trotted out here where you have this, you have a 1 mana pump spell in your graveyard and you just keep a mana up and that like they're in a spot where, you got a God's Willing from the Mystical Archive. Like that's just a lock.
Yeah.
So
that's really strong.
The baseline on this is like a B. But you can definitely get it higher than that if you do a good job of picking up cards that work well with it.
Yeah, I like it at BB+ and build around A-. Like if you actually make it a thing. Semester's End is next. It's 3 and a white for an instant and rare. It says exile any number of target creatures and or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of the next end step, return each of them to the battlefield under its owner's control. Each of them enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if it's a creature and an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a planeswalker. So you can get in an attack with a creature or something, then blink all your stuff, bring them back. They're vigilant, if you will, and they untap and then they get a counter as well. You can save your creatures.
This is pretty bad, I think.
It's 4 mana.
It does re-trigger all your enter those the battlefield stuff and put a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures, or at least all your non-token creatures. I would not advise trying to use this with your tokens. And yes, it can save something, but it's expensive enough that you're not really going to use this to save something. It's just hard to imagine how that plays out.
Yeah.
And I think overall Semester's End looks to me like a D+.
Same.
Just Not a card you're going to want in your deck most of the time.
Right. It does have some applications and has really nice blowout potential, but it is expensive and clunky and hard to set up is what I would imagine. Sparring Regimen is 2 and a white for an enchantment at rare. When it enters the battlefield, learn. So that's nice. And then whenever you attack, put a +1/+1 counter on target attacking creature and untap it. That's good.
Yeah, Sparring Regiment's quite good. This card will snowball really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna play Sparring Regiment, and you're gonna end up in a spot where you just get a counter every single turn with your giant vigilant creature. Like your opponent's gonna have a real hard time winning under those circumstances, and that's not even taking into account the fact that it does draw you a lesson. So I would actually give Sparring Regiment an A-. If you play this on turn 3 after playing a creature on turn 2, what is your opponent gonna do?
They cannot kill every creature you cast. Yeah, that is tough.
Right. They're going to be in a spot where they have to kill every creature you play or lose to this card. And this card can go grab you a creature, can go grab you a summoning.
That's the combo.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah, because flying is amazing with this thing.
And it just means that you're not going to draw this card and not draw a creature as long as you make sure you have some creatures in your sideboard to go get, which I think is a big part of it too.
The fail case is when you've got smaller ground creatures and your opponent has bigger blockers, right? Because you can't get the snowball going if they just block it and kill your creature after the first attack, right? Yeah,
that fail case though is your opponent has brickwalled you. And you have no ways to have evasion or kill their creatures or get in there. And yes, that definitely isn't great for you, but it also is presumably you need ways to solve that anyway. This can't do everything.
Right. Yeah, I like B+ for Sparring Regimen. That's a beatdown. That card's a beating. I'm not looking forward to seeing that on the other side because I'm never taking that card. Strict Proctor is our last white card. It's 1 and a white for a 1/3 Spirit Cleric at rare. It's a flyer. And whenever a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability to trigger, counter that ability and lets its controller pays 2 mana. And that is not an opponent-specific thing here either. So strict indeed.
So mostly this is a 2 mana 1/3 flyer, which again, that's a card I would tend to put in my deck, especially since 2/1 flying is a token type in the set.
Mm-hmm. And Cleric matters, Spirit matters as well.
Right. So in general, I think that you should play this card. If it messes with too much of your own stuff, then maybe you shouldn't put it in your deck, and you should just be like, all right, well, this card's too annoying for me to deal with, so I'm not going to play it. But also note that if it doesn't mess with your stuff, it probably messes with some of their stuff. Mm-hmm. Most decks are going to have something that it messes with, but I would say the text box is slightly positive because you don't have to put the card in your deck if the text box is bad for you. Right. So it's more likely to be good for you than it is bad for you. And it's a 2 mana 1/3 flyer. That all adds up to a C, but it's still a card that, you can definitely play.
But yeah, cheap evasive threats still count. These are 2 rares, but a card like this into Sparring Regiment is real nasty. All right, so that's white. Let's move on to blue. First card is Archmage Emeritus. It is 2 blue for a 2/2 human wizard at rare. And it's got Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, I got a shiver, Luis. Draw a card.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I like.
This card does a lot of what you want out of a Magecraft card. It fuels itself. So when you cast a spell, you draw another card, which draws you closer to other spells. And it's a 4 mana 2/2, so it's a little behind the curve, but shouldn't be too hard to figure out a spot where you can play this card. And if your opponent doesn't kill it, you're going to generate massive value. And if they do kill it, well, they killed your creature. That's not the end of the world. Oh, it's also cheap enough, by the way, that you often want to play this on 5 or 6 mana to play a spell immediately. Yeah,
to get that card right away. That is a play pattern that you should definitely be aware of. Must kill, right? It's just a lightning rod type card. It hits the battlefield, and if your opponent doesn't kill it, you're probably going to win. I like those cards. Even if they do end up killing it quite often, I like those cards because they force the issue. They say, hey, you have to react to me here. And even if they do, as you mentioned, it's not a disaster from a card advantage perspective. But also they had to use up mana on their turn with their kill spell to take this thing down. That is a lot of pressure to put on your opponent. And I like doing that. I like just saying, check, go, answer this or die. And if they don't, you can win. And if they do, then you move on with the game.
The cool thing about this, by the way, is it's not asking you to do anything completely wacky to work. Mm-hmm. It's saying put spells in your deck, which that has traditionally not been a huge downside to do. So
right.
I like that as well. I think that
would you consider this a build around?
Yes, totally. I would say that's a build around A though.
Yeah.
Like if you do the thing, it's going to be really good.
It's going to be absurd. So build around A for Archmage Emeritus. Dream Strix is 2 and a blue for a 3/2 flying bird illusion. It's rare. When it enters the battle, or excuse me, when it becomes a target of a spell, sacrifice it. That's a little rough. But when it dies, you learn. This is a cool little rare, right? Like this thing isn't dominating everything. This is nice. I like this card.
Yeah, I like it quite a bit. I think that Dream Strix is just going to be a great card because yes, it dies if they target it, but they have to target it with a spell. So it's not like they're 0 for 1-ing you. They're not playing, that they're not tapping it with a tapper and killing it like some of the creatures that pop on abilities. Mm-hmm. And even if their spell's like a cantrip, it's probably fizzling it, so they're not even drawing a card. And when it dies, you draw a card. I mean, it's not quite as good as drawing a card, but learning is still quite strong. So yeah, I think that Dream Strix is an excellent card all around. I would play it even if I had no lessons, but honestly, it's just not that hard to pick up a lesson or two. I don't think that's going to be an impossibility. So I would give Dream Strix a B+. It's just a really good card.
It's basically an evasive threat that draws you a card when it dies. That's kind of where you want to be. Ingenious Mastery is next. It's X, 2 and a blue for a sorcery at rare. You may pay 2 and a blue rather than pay this spell's mana cost. If the 2 and a blue cost was paid, you draw 3 cards, then an opponent creates 2 treasure tokens, and then they scry 2. If that cost wasn't paid, you draw X cards. So we've got 2 kind of very different things, right? We've got like this late game, you sink the 3 mana in, and then you draw as many cards as you can for whatever X is. And that's just that, right? There's nothing else to fuss with there. You're just drawing a bunch of cards if you have a bunch of mana. And then the other thing is like, well, you can cast it for a lot cheaper, but you really hook up your opponent.
So first of all, this card's not winning the templating award of the year. Let's just put it that way.
No, it is not.
Second, I actually think that this card is quite good because ignore the alternate cost. At 6 mana, it draws 3, and at 7 mana, it draws 4, and at 5 mana, it draws 2. These are all rates I'm comfortable with, especially given that I have access to all of them. Because 3 and X to draw X cards is a card that will let you win late game or like games that go long, especially if you're in Quandrix and you ramp, or you're even in Prismari and you can make some treasures, or you have the 2/2 that makes your spells cheaper. And then you look at the alt cost, which is kind of a little wonky because at the time when you'd be most likely to use the alternate cost, it's the most damaging to give them 2 treasures. Imagine you cast this on turn 3. First of all, you have to discard the hand size. Second, you give them 2 treasures, now they can play a 5-drop on their turn 3 or a 6-drop on their turn 4. That's really not the road to victory that you want to take. So the alternate cost is good in a pinch, but in general, you're probably not that interested in doing it. The X cost is pretty good. I guess if you're in the late game, you can alternate cost it on like turn 8, so you have 5 mana to spare to play those 3 cards. Giving them the treasures doesn't really matter. And yeah, Scry 2 is good, but it's not the end of the world. So overall, I like Ingenious Mastery at B. It's a good closer. It's not a card that you can play very easily in the early game, but it's definitely strong in the late game.
Yeah, I like B for Ingenious Mastery. Interesting card. Next one's really sweet. It's multiple choice. It is blue and an X for a sorcery at rare. If X is 1, scry 1, then draw a card. So 2 mana, scry 1, draw a card. Sure. If X is 2, you may choose a player. They return a creature they control to its owner's hand. So they get to choose it. So that sucks. If X is 3, you get a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So 4 mana, 4/4. That's kind of sweet. And if X is 4, you get all of them.
So
I'm just aiming for 4 here. Also, I should read it. It says, do all of the above, because that's the conceit here, right? I don't want to take away the designer's joke.
This is basically a 5 mana 4/4 that bounces one of their creatures, though you don't get to choose. They get to choose. It's kind of weird. Then scries 1 and draws a card. That's a card I'm always putting in my deck.
I'm so
a 5 mana 4/4 scry 1, draw 1 that makes them bounce one of their creatures. Obviously, that's great. So that's the floor, because you can have that every single time for 5 mana. Mm-hmm. You also get the option to play the other modes if you're stuck. If you keep a 2-lander and you have multiple choice, well, cast this to make it so you can hit your 3rd land drop.
Right.
If you need to bounce one of their creatures, sure. If you're stuck on 4 or just your turn requires that you spend 4 mana and you need to make a 4/4, that works too. So all those together makes multiple choice in A. It would be
Definitely.
good even at the big mode, as it were, but it's good. It's even better that you get the choice of all of those things.
Right. You don't want to knock it down because you get that choice. So A for multiple choice, that is a sick card. Somebody compared it to like a Super Mana War, which I'm like, okay, I'll buy it. Next is Teachings of the Archaics. This is 2 and a blue for a sorcery lesson. It's rare. It says if an opponent has more cards in hand than you, draw 2 cards. Draw 3 cards instead if an opponent has at least 4 more cards in hand than you.
Again, this card gets a lot more interesting as a lesson because it's the kind of card that is pretty situational. Note this does nothing if they don't have more cards than you.
Right.
And it checks on resolution. So if you both have 3 cards, you can cast this, and then you'll be at 2 cards. Of course, there's a little bit of a shell game because if they respond, then all of a sudden they could have fewer cards, and so on and so forth. But when you cast this. It's a divination you can pull out of your lesson plan. Yeah, that's fine. And then if you have a low curve deck, and that's where this gets really interesting, you get to draw 3 cards. So the idea here is you play a 1-drop, you play a 2-drop, you on your turn 3 you play a card that gets this, and then you play this, and they're still slow out the gates. I don't know how realistic that's going to be to end up doing, but that is at least the joke here.
Yeah, and it is really cool design space because they couldn't print this card normally because everybody would say, well, just too often it just does straight up nothing. I'm not going to play it. And they've used the lesson design space to explore that. Hey, this is highly conditional, but can be pretty good in the right spot. So you can have it as a backup lesson and maybe get some sick value out of it. That's a cool little area to play in, I think. Very difficult for me to say where, like, this is, strictly a lesson, right? Like, this is just basically always going to be in the board.
I would not advise putting this card in your main deck.
Right. I don't know where I would take it.
This looks like a C+ to me because it's just not always going to work out,
Yeah. Feels like a D to me, kind of. Just like there's a lot of times where you're just not interested in it. I don't know.
The thing is, like, one of the cool things about lessons is you don't have to think about how good these cards are to draw or in your deck. That is not actually relevant because you're not putting them in your deck. You're putting them in your sideboard. So when we say what's the rating on Teachings of the Archaics, it's strictly what is the opportunity cost of taking this card in the draft.
Exactly. That's why I said I don't know where to take it and not I don't know how good it is.
Right. And
right.
And I think I would take this at about a C+ level to have access to it.
Okay.
Because when you want it, it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah. I think the thing that we're going to see is that, like, when you're in the market for a lesson, you do need to lock up the sort of the go-to lesson, like the one that makes a token or whatever. And then you can have some room to take these type of cards after. Next card is Tempted by the Auric. It is 1 blue. That's a good mana cost. A lot of precedent there. Sorcery at rare. It says for each opponent, gain control of up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls with mana value. Again, that's converted mana cost. 3 or less. So you get to control. It's a mind control for 3 or less for 1 blue.
Still great.
Sorcery. That's amazing. That's great. Yeah,
my mind control is great. This isn't going to hit the cards you most want to hit, and I think they are rightfully hesitant to print blanket mind controls. Mm-hmm. Right? Mind control is not making any lists of the most fun cards to play against Unlimited, but this has a couple drawbacks, which is one is it costs triple blue, so it's not going to be the easiest card to cast. And then the second is it only steals their small stuff. It's still really good. When you steal a 3 mana creature, you spent 4, they spent 3, but then you get a 3 mana creature, so you're up 2 mana, and it's a 2-for-1, and it puts you ahead on board. So still a strong card. I would give Tempted by the Auric a B+, mostly because of the mana cost. Yeah. You're just going to have games where you're on 2 islands, 2 mountains on turn 4, and you just can't cast this one. It would be really good.
Right, and that's the key, right, is that's when you want to do it is turn 4, and you're not always going to be able to do so. So well-designed, B+ for Tempted by the Auric. That's it for blue. That'll move us over to black. First card is Baleful Mastery. It's 3 and a black for an instant at rare. It says you can pay 1 and a black rather than pay this spell's mana cost. If the 1 and a black cost was paid, an opponent draws a card.
Excellent. Love to see it.
Exile target creature or planeswalker.
Again, this is just strict upside. We would always play 3 and a black, instant exile a creature or planeswalker. And if you need to pay the alt cost and give them a card, then you need to do it. Sometimes that will win you the game. So
what is this templating? What does it say? An opponent draws a card.
I don't know. I don't really know.
Shouldn't it say target opponent draws a card? Or
well, it's better just to choose without targeting, I think, probably.
So it's an opponent of your choosing draws a card, but that's implied. Okay.
Yeah, it's for commander.
Yeah, no, I get that part. I just
Marshall, I'm going to cast Baleful Mastery on your thing, but don't worry. If it resolves, I'll let you draw a card. Then it resolves, and I'm like, no, in fact, I'll let Brian Wong draw a card.
Oh, dirty.
Because in this hypothetical world, me, you, and Brian Wong are playing Commander, which strains the imagination to some degree.
So 4 mana exile target creature at instant speed. We would already be quite happy with that, right? Not ultra efficient, but the kind of card that you would put in any deck that could cast it. This one has a little bit of upside. I know it doesn't look like it, but it actually is upside that you have this opportunity to give your opponent a card and pay 1 and a black for the times when you absolutely need to. So we don't want to knock the card for that. We want to say, hey, that's an extra thing that we get, even if it's kind of crappy to give your opponent a card. B+ for Baleful Mastery?
Oh, yeah. Easily B+, and I just hope to deck someone with it.
Oh, that's great. Does the card get exiled first, or do they lose first?
I think they would lose afterwards.
All right. So we get to make
Callous Blood Mage here. So Callous Blood Mage is 2 and a black for a 2/1 Vampire Warlock at rare. When it enters the battlefield, choose one. Create a 1/1 pest. This is the 1/1 token that dies to gain a life. You draw a card and you lose a life, or exile target player's graveyard.
Nice.
Yeah, solid card.
It's
You'll always play it. Always be happy with it. The most common modes will be, of course, the make a pest or draw a card, depending on what you need. The least common mode is going to be exile in their graveyard, but that could technically come up every now and then. Very good card. I would give Callous Blood Mage a B+. It's not a bomb rare, but it's gonna work out pretty most of the time. Like you're never going to be unhappy with this. Yeah, it reminds me of the Dream Strix. It's like just a solidly powered rare. B+ for Callous Blood Mage. Next is Confront the Past. It's black X for a sorcery. It's a lesson. It is rare. It says choose one. Return target planeswalker card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, so not really relevant for us most of the time. Or you can remove twice X loyalty counters from target planeswalker and opponent controls. All right, so just get out of here. This is just an F. Well, it's a D because it is a lesson. A build around D? Okay, sure. Well, it's not even a build around. It's more like, I mean, it's got elements of that. If I had a good planeswalker, which there are, there's Professor Onyx, for example, I would look to play Confront the Past and be pretty happy with this card. You would put it in your deck. Well, I would put it in my sideboard to go grab as a lesson. Okay, but gotcha. I would want it during the draft is more my point. Like, it would be a card that's interesting. And plus, if you pick this up kind of for free, like it's not like I'm saying to take it highly, and you have it in your sideboard, sometimes they'll play the Professor Onyx, and you're like, yeah, this actually kills your bomb rare. So sure. Not a card whose application is going to come up very often, but when it's good, it will be pretty good. I would still give Confront the Past a D, but it's definitely the lesson part makes this an actually more interesting card than it would be otherwise by a lot. Yeah, we don't really have grades for cards like this. I mean, it's more sideboard. I mean, not literally in your sideboard type card like that you bring out, but it's so situational that it's more into that territory than anything else. Next card is Auric Lore Mage. This is 2 black for a 3/3 human warlock at rare. You can tap it to search your library for a card, put that card into your graveyard, and then shuffle. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you put a +1/+1 counter on Auric Lore Mage. Yeah, I like this card. I mean, it's not hard to feed the Lore Mage here. Yeah. All you need to do is just play some instants and sorceries, and then this is a 4-mana 3/3 that grows every turn. Granted, it has to tap itself, but you can still leave it up as a blocker. And then if you want to put specific cards in your graveyard, it doesn't even have to be a spell. It can help with, there's a couple like Raise Dead type effects in Witherbloom. This could help with those. If you run out of spells to get, you could start thinning out lands if you've got nothing better to do. I would give Auric Lore Mage a B+. It's just going to be a pretty pretty beefy card.
I would assume B minus. I mean, it's really slow, right? Like before you actually start getting to attack, like you say go, then you don't do anything, then your turn is spent. Like you mentioned, being on blocks, then tapping it, going to get a thing. Okay, now it's a 4/4 for 4. Fine. But are you going to start attacking that next turn? Sometimes, but that's not like amazing, right?
Yeah, but you don't need to attack for this to be a pretty big threat if it's keeping them from attacking and then growing every turn. One downside is when you are growing it, you are thinning out your deck of action.
I was gonna say that. Is that a relevant thing? You're making your deck more skewed towards having lands.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think it's a big effect, but it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Okay. I'm going to say B minus for Auric Lore Mage. I think it's fine. I think it's clunky.
All right, I'll give it a B. I think B is fine.
Okay. What about Poet's Quill?
This is one of my favorite arts in the set. I don't know why. I think the art's really good. But 1 and a black for an equipment at rare. It's an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, learn. An equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. The equip cost is 1 and a black. So 2 to cast, 2 to equip, +1/+1 lifelink, and you learn, as a Poet's Quill unsurprisingly teaches you something. This card's great.
That's really strong.
A +1/+1 lifelink equipment's really good, and then the fact that it finds you a creature, like we mentioned on the sparring practice, just getting a creature with your card that needs creatures to work is pretty good. And then later in the game, it can also get you other more specific things. Plus, this equipment will kind of dominate the game. I would give Poet's Quill an A-. I think this card is really going to be very impactful on most games.
Definitely. And when you think about the more aggressive matchups too, it's really devastating. I mean, it just goes on anything, attacks. You can even, at 2 mana, you could even consider switching it to something else on defense. Just make it so difficult to die to, beat down deck. So A- for Poet's Quill. Next is Professor Onyx, this is a card you mentioned a minute ago, right?
Yeah, this is one of the big planeswalkers of the set. I didn't even know, maybe the only planeswalker of the set, I think. Oh, no, there's Kasmina as well. 4 black for 5 loyalty Liliana Planeswalker at legendary, or she's legendary and it's at Mythic Rare. Has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, your opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So
wow.
This is a Magecraft trigger. Like this is a Magecraft trigger that you are going to be very, very happy with. And then it has +1. You lose a life. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. So you get to cast effectively Anticipate off of this card, which is again very, very strong. And then it also has -3. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls.
Jeez.
They have to sack their biggest creature. And then -8, each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times. So,
okay, that's kind of cool. But
Professor Onyx is a house.
That's a house.
She comes down with 6 loyalty if you want to +1 her immediately. You get to draw the best of your top 3 cards. Also putting the other ones in the graveyard isn't even bad. And then the Magecraft means every time you cast a spell, you drain them for 2, as well as having the -3 of killing their biggest creature. Plus, the ultimate's attainable given that she starts at such high loyalty. And if you ultimate, your opponent's going to discard their hand and lose like 12 life. That's not a game-ending ultimate like some, but it's priced to move in that you actually get to the ultimate in this particular case.
Yeah, I mean, this card's the easiest A I've ever seen. A+.
Yeah, I would give Professor Onyx an A+. It's going to really dominate the game under most circumstances here.
Wow, that's incredible. Huge card in the format for sure. Next, and our last black card is Sedgemoor Witch. It's 2 and a black for a 3/2 human warlock at rare. It's got menace, so 3/2 menace for 3 mana, not bad. And it has ward. You pay 3 life, and as a reminder, whenever this creature becomes a target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless that player pays 3 life. So whatever the ward cost is, they have to pay. And then it also has Magecraft. You get a 1/1 black and green pest creature that when it dies, you gain a life. Woo!
Nice. Little Monastery Mentor action here. Not quite as good, but
no, but this is
3/2
great.
menace for 3 that lightning bolts them if they try to kill it is pretty sweet. And then the Magecraft's really strong. Making a pest, 1 pest is already putting this card well above average, and if you can make multiples, this card is really going to deliver. So I would give Sedgemoor Witch an A-. I think Sedgemoor Witch is going to be a very strong card in pretty much any deck that could cast it.
And there's no way out for your opponent. They're getting hit one way or the other here. Red. First card is Conspiracy Theorist. This is 1 and a red for a human shaman. It's a 2/2. It's rare. Whenever Conspiracy Theorist attacks, you may pay 1 and discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So you can rummage, but you have to pay 1. And whenever you discard 1 or more non-land cards, you may exile one of them from your graveyard. If you do, you may cast it this turn.
So basically, it's a 2-mana 2/2, and when you attack, you pay 1, you discard a card to draw a card, but then you can still play the discarded card. So you're getting this like nice little 2-for-1.
Okay, and it's a little mana intensive because you had to pay 1 up front, but then you can pay that thing. That's kind of cool.
And with the theme of Magic these days, it is cast. You can't discard a land and play the land to it. So, good to keep that in mind, just in case you were wondering.
That's a lot of action on a 2-mana 2/2.
Yeah, I mean, Conspiracy Theorist is a solid card. Mm-hmm. The way these do tend to play out though is like, how often can your 2-mana 2/2 attack your opponent? Like, how often are you actually gonna get that going? And the answer is just like not very often. So definitely a fine card, but mostly what's going to happen with Conspiracy Theorist is you're going to play this on turn 2 and maybe get an attack in and get some value. Great. Mostly though, you're going to play this, and at some point you're going to attack, pay 1 to discard a card that you're able to play this turn, draw your card, trade off this, and get your 2-for-1, or even chump attack and just trade it for a card.
Yeah.
One thing to note. This does say whenever you discard cards, it works with other discard outlets.
Okay.
So if you have another way to routinely discard cards, this card can actually just let you discard and then play those cards over and over again. Or rather use that ability and then continue to play those cards. So it's got a little bit of action there, but for the most part, it's just a good card. I would give Conspiracy Theorist a C+.
Yeah, it's right on that border between B minus and C+, but I would do C+ as well. Also, I can't wait to just kill these.
Yes.
Crackle with Power is next. That's a heck of a mana cost. It's red XXX, and it's Mythic Rare sorcery. Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each of X targets, up to X targets.
So the question, Marshall, is how good is this card? Given like what happens if you have 5 mana with this?
So if you have 5 mana, it deals 5 times X. So you've done your X equals 1. So it's 5 damage to 3 targets.
To 1 target.
Oh, to 1 target. So 5 mana to 1 target. That's good.
So it's basically 3 red deal 5 damage to any target.
At sorcery.
That's the baseline. Yeah,
that's good.
That's fine.
No, what I mean is, damage. If that's the baseline, that's good.
Sure, if that's the baseline, that's good.
So the next stop is 8 mana,
and then it's 8 mana. So then at 8 mana, you deal 10 damage to 2 targets.
So and that's probably game ending, but that's also where the train stops and might not even get there. I mean, this likely is just 5 mana deal 5 to something, right?
It's 5. Well, I don't think 8 mana is like that unrealistic, given the fact that you are gonna end up in a spot where you are working towards it, right? If you have this card in your hand, you're gonna try pretty hard to get that going.
And you get to kill 2 things or kill an opponent.
Yes, you get to kill 2 things or kill an opponent. And then if you get to 11 mana, of course, that then we're just really talking. But I don't think that obviously is going to happen very often.
Right. So the question is, we should always rely on 3 red, do 5 damage to something. And then if built around, or if the game goes long, or if you happen to hit a bunch of lands, then you'll sometimes be able to play it for 8 mana. And then that's kind of it. That's what this card is. I can live with that.
I mean, yeah, I think that using it as a 5 mana deal 5 with massive upside is I think a pretty good way to go about winning games, because first of all, Prismari does have some cards that really reward you for trying to play expensive spells or make it easier to do so. So you can end up in a deck that maybe can enable this better than you might think. Plus, do you remember Fight with Fire?
Yeah.
Like Fight with Fire was obscene.
It was
obviously
gross.
This card doesn't have quite the functionality, because Fight with Fire let you divide it like kind of any way you chose. But still, the fact that you can use this to kill their 5 mana, 5/5 on turn 5, but then later in the game you're like, all right, here's my 8 mana spell, take 10, take 10. Like that's awesome.
That's insane. It's also 1 mana cheaper than Fight with Fire.
Yeah.
On the high end there.
That and the fact that there is support to cast expensive spells. I like Crackle with Power at an A, I think. Just because
I think if you get to 8 mana, you're gonna you can't target the same thing twice, right?
No, you cannot.
But you're gonna kill whatever their best thing is, or 2 of their best things, or 1 of their best things and do 10 to them. I just feel like winning the game from that point is gonna be trivial. So
yes,
I like A for Crackle with Power. That's awesome. I mean, the baseline's a little blah, but the upside's there for sure. What about Draconic Intervention?
So this is 2 red for a sorcery at rare. As an additional cost, exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and it deals X damage to each non-dragon creature, where X is the exiled card's mana value, and then it exiles all creatures that would be killed by this and exiles itself. So
it's attempting to be a Wrath here, but it has this really clunky extra thing of you need to exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and how powerful that Wrath is depends on the mana cost of that instant or sorcery. That's a lot of setup cost there.
It is. I mean, part of the joke is Prismari has these cards that you can discard for 2 mana to make a treasure.
Right, so they're 7 and 6 or whatever, yeah.
The thing is, this card actually... I'm less interested in this dealing 7 to everything than I am trying to set it up to deal 4 to everything with a 5 toughness creature in play. Because that's where I see the edge gained, right? Mm-hmm. If you can cast this and deal 2 to everything when you have a pair of X3s or something. So it's kind of tricky because it's not you're not always going to get exactly what you want out of this. I think the unreliability of this is what scares me the most. And I think as a result, I'm looking at Draconic Intervention as kind of like a build around like B. Mm-hmm. Where if you enable it, it is great. It actually it has the capability of being awesome. It's just hard to do that.
Yeah, because where I'm leaning is this is build around only, right? I just don't think I want this unless I'm in Prismari or unless I've really built a deck to take advantage, because the fail case is too harsh, right? Just the fact that you can't even cast it if you can't get a thing in the yard. And then even if you do happen to have a thing in the yard, it might not be of a size that actually kills creatures. So,
or it might be too big and all of a sudden you're wrathing and you don't get to keep your 6/6 because your only option is to play the card you discarded.
And that's also, by the way, being layered on top of all the normal caveats with Wraths, where sometimes they're not good. Sometimes you're ahead on board and they just sit in your hand and don't do anything, and you wish they were a 3 mana 3/3 and you could win the game with that instead. So, I'm actually pretty low on Draconic Intervention overall. That is a lot of work for what is ultimately going to be a very inconsistent spell, but you can't help but look at the situation where it's perfectly fit into the deck and is kind of a powerhouse.
I think in the deck that has 10 or 11 spells, which is a realistic deck, this card is going to be very good. Because
do those spells have to be of a certain mana value to make it worth it?
Well, what I think is going to happen is you're going to have that option.
If 4 of them are 1-drop spells.
Sure, if there's too many that are really too cheap, it's not going to work. But I can just imagine very easily, especially with Learn and Lesson, your graveyard has a 2-mana spell, a 3-mana spell, and a 7-mana spell. Mm-hmm. Having the option to do 2, 3, or 7 damage to everything is very strong.
That's very good. All right, let's go build around B on Draconic Intervention, but real emphasis on the build around part. What about Ifrit Flame Painter?
This is 3 and a red for a 1/4 double strike. It's an Ifrit Shaman at rare. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. That spell gets exiled instead of being put in the graveyard.
Jeez, okay. That's kind of sweet.
So
you can even get 2 of them?
4 mana 1/4 double strike, which isn't the hardest thing to block, but if you put a little work into it, can make it, you can clear the path, right? You can use bounce, you can use removal, you can use, give a creature +3/+1 and really start to kind of lay the beatings. And when it hits them, you get to cast 2 spells because it has double strike.
Yeah.
This card seems really dangerous. Imagine turn 2, you discard one of those cards to make a treasure. Turn 3, you play a Flame Painter.
Oh my God.
Your opponent's like, well, I can't kill it, but I can play this 3/3. I hope this works. And you're like, no, that's not going to work.
No. Bounce that. Get the 7-drop from my graveyard. Yeah, that's great.
It is also really good with tricks because they're always going to block this card. So you can just kind of make them walk into your combat tricks over and over again.
Yep. That's right. B+ for Ifrit Flame Painter.
Yeah, I like B plus for it. It's not even really a build around because I feel like you're not going to have that much trouble finding spells to put in your deck, you know.
Right.
And the card I really want to combine this with is Enthusiastic Study. By the way, giving it +3/+1 and trample, like that is just gonna go completely haywire.
Yeah, totally. And this card just works well with combat tricks in general. So there you go. Oh, and one other quick question. So let's say I have like +2/+2. I hit, I can cast it on it and get a little extra damage on the regular strike, like if it's lethal or something.
Yeah, you can, like, let's say you had the +3/+1, you attack, you cast it, they take 4, you replay that, and then they take 7. So you're getting 11 points total out of that interaction.
Okay, yeah, so that's pretty cool. Next is Fervent Mastery. This is 3 red for a sorcery at rare. It says you may pay 2 red rather than pay the spell's mana cost. If you do, an opponent discards any number of cards, then draws that many cards. And what it actually does is search your library for up to 3 cards, put them into your hand, shuffle, then discard 3 cards at random.
Let's just give this a half and move on.
Gamble.
This card is not for limited.
No.
There's so much going on here that involves constructed. This is really bad. You're just going to go look for 3 cards, then discard 3 cards at random, and like marginally improve your hand for 5 mana. Yeah, no good.
No good. So F for Fervent Mastery. But send us your screenshots. What about Illuminate History?
There's 2 red. It's a sorcery, a lesson at rare. Discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. Then, if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, make a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. So, if you have, 4 cards in your graveyard and you cast this, discarding 2 cards, you get that spirit. Mm-hmm. And then you are down a card here because you're casting this and then discarding 3. So you're spending 4 cards to draw 3, for example. But if you get the spirit, you get the card back right away. And of course, this is a lesson, so you pulled it out of your sideboard. I actually really like this. This is the way to get out of mana flood, right? When you've kept 2 cards in your hand and then you cast a lesson card. You cast this, you discard those 2, you draw 2 cards. You also get a 3/2 spirit, and you're kind of out of that mana flood situation. So I would give Illuminate History a B. I think you're always going to want this if you have access to it.
Yeah, this is a late game lesson. If you have this in your sideboard, keep those extra lands that you don't need, keep that 2-drop that doesn't affect the board anymore, keep that stuff in your hand so that if you draw a learn card, you can really kind of go off here. Last red card is called Retriever Phoenix. It's 3 and a red for a 2/2 Phoenix at rare. It's got flying and haste, so 4 mana 2/2 flying haste. Okay. When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, learn. And then it says, as long as it's in your graveyard, if you would learn, you may instead return Retriever Phoenix to the battlefield. So it doesn't learn again if it comes from the battlefield, but you can, cash in learn, especially if you don't have anything good, any more good lessons to just get back the Phoenix over and over.
I love Retriever Phoenix.
Pretty cool.
4 mana 2/2 flying haste learn is a card I'd be willing to pay 4 mana for, and that's fine. But the fact that it comes back every time you learn means it's just going to be a really hard card for your opponent to kill. In a deck with like 3 or 4 learn cards, this is edging up towards an A-. I would give it a B+. Mm-hmm. I think that's where I would start. But you can definitely improve this card to the point where it's going to be really good. Plus, Mondo combo, you can like play a learn card on turn 1, discard this instead of getting a card out of your sideboard. Turn 2, cast another learn card, and then all of a sudden you're off to the races.
Boom, you're in there. I like that. B+ for Retriever Phoenix. That's our last red card. It moves us to green. First one is called Accomplished Alchemist. It's 3 and a green for a 2/5 elf druid. It's rare. It taps to add 1 mana of any color. 2/5 for 4 that taps to add 1 mana of any color. Interesting. And then it also taps to add X mana of any one color, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. Kind of a nice little twist. But very defensive, kind of slow card. Makes you wonder, this set seems to be built heavily towards the colleges kind of exclusively, right? There's not a lot of overlap or splashing that it looks like is going to be popular. There certainly doesn't seem to be like a 4 or 5 color deck. So where does the Alchemist fit into the mix here is the question.
Mostly it's a 4 mana 2/5 that taps for a mana.
That ramps. Okay, sure.
Yeah, you're not really looking for this to like splash a 3rd color as much as, like a Quandrix deck's going to be kind of happy like playing this and then getting to play a 6-drop on turn 5. It also a 2/5 can block pretty nicely. I think the tapping to add X mana is a little bit of a red herring because I'm not putting like pure life gain in my decks to make this card, add more mana.
Right.
It's a nice upside. Sometimes like You'll play a card that sacrifices 2 pests, and all of a sudden you can tap this and tap it for 2 mana instead, and that's great. But for the most part, I think Accomplished Alchemist is just going to be kind of what you see is what you get. 4 mana, 2/5 taps for any color in mostly a 2-color set. So that looks like a C plus to me.
Yeah, C plus, and then these type of cards can range even further than that. But this is solid, and like you said, it's a really good blocker. A 2/5 is a pain, so that's really good too. Basic Conjuration is 1 green for a sorcery lesson at rare. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and gain 3 life.
Not super into this because you're jumping through a lot of hoops. You're casting your learn card, you're pulling this out, you're casting this, still not affecting the board, by the way. The 3 life isn't bad because that at least kind of makes up for the fact that you did nothing for multiple turns. But then you also, it just doesn't have the fail case of, you're looking for a land or anything. It's just if you find a creature in your top 6. So, again, it's a lesson. I'm glad to have access to this card, but I'm going to take it around like a C plus level because I'm just not that worried about, finding a way to make my lessons into spending an additional 3 mana to look for a creature.
It's weird looking at the rare lessons. It just makes me want one of those Inklings, the 2/1 flying one, as often as I can get it.
Oh yeah,
it's just better.
Inkling Summoning is just going to be so good. I think that's going to be one of the marquee commons.
Yeah. Okay. What about Dragon's Guard Elite?
He says, 1 and a green for a 2/2 human druid at rare. It has Magecraft, put a +1/+1 counter on Dragon's Guard Elite, and 4 green, double the number of +1/+1 counters on Dragon's Guard Elite. So this card is awesome. A 2 mana 2/2 that grows every time you play a spell, and then on 6 mana, you can either threaten to double, so you can attack with a 4/4 one of these into a 5/5 and they can't block it, or you can actually just start spending the mana to double, and once you spent the mana the first time, pretty good deal on the second activation, right? Once you spend 6 mana to double it from 3 to 6 counters, I'm a lot more interested into doubling it up to 12 counters there.
That's right, and it's important to note. You mentioned this, but you don't have to tap this to do that. So that's threat of activation, that's beatdown, that's on your end step. I'll double my Dragon's Guard Elite while leaving up these other things. I mean, look, this is what a rare 2-drop should be. This is really powerful stuff, right? I mean, this thing can be a game-winning card that you can pay for just 1 and a green and can serve as just a blocker for an aggressive deck too if you need it to be. So I like that a lot.
If you attack with this into their 2/2, are they going to block and then you cast your instant speed cantrip or what have you, or if there's a couple more things on the board, you cast a removal spell or a bounce spell on one of their other creatures. I guess there's not much bounce in the set, but in any case, this card has a lot of different threat of activation stuff going on.
You cast an instant. Yes. Just you name it. Yeah.
I would give Dragon's Guard Elite an A- because it has so much potential. It's really easy for this card to run away with the game, which is a prized, commodity in a 2-drop.
Yeah, I was going to say B+, but I think I'm with you. A- for Dragon's Guard Elite. That's just so good for 2 mana. Next is Ecological Appreciation. It's 2 and a green and X for a sorcery. It's mythic. It says search your library and graveyard for up to 4 creature cards with different names that each have mana value X or less and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards, shuffle the chosen cards into your library, and put the rest onto the battlefield, and then you exile Ecological Appreciation. So rewind me here. They each have a mana value X or less. So if I do X equals 3, I can get 3-drop, 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 3-drop if I want, or any combination, but they have to be 3 or less.
Yeah, this card's busted.
That's sick.
No, it's not really.
That is sick. You get 2 things no matter what onto the battlefield, right?
For 6 mana, you get your 3rd and 4th best 3-drops from your deck into play.
Oh, right, because they get to choose the ones that you don't want. So you get So what about 7? You don't have enough 4-drops at 7. Yeah, okay.
Well, you can sub in 3s. So at 7 mana, you can go 4-drop, 4-drop, 3-drop, 3-drop. But guess what?
You're getting
I have a prediction as to which ones you're getting. So
that sucks. See, they kind of got me on the put them onto the battlefield because I was going down this path of they're going to go in my hand, and then it's maybe not so much.
Maybe it's okay, good, but I don't think it's good. It's the kind of card that it's an X spell. So at 5 mana, you get your 3rd and 4th best 2-drops. 6 mana 3-drops, 7 mana 4-drops, and then I guess at 8 mana you could get a bunch of 5-drops, but how many 5-drops are you really playing in your deck?
You're going to have to snipe some 4s, yeah.
My guess is Ecological Appreciation is an F, but I could see some configuration of decks where this card ends up being closer to like a C.
Yeah, I wonder how what I want to do now is look at, like, just take the 3-drops in an average, like my next 4 decks or whatever that play green, and just go, how bad are, what are the worst 2?
Yeah.
You know, what do these piles actually look like in practice? And, you know, I think that it's probably okay. Like, it's not a disaster, but this is a mythic. Like, this felt really flashy, and it's just not going to be like that. I'm a little sad about it. I'll give it a D. I think D for ecological appreciation. Yeah, maybe you could come up with some good combos. Exponential Growth is next. It's GGXX for a sorcery at rare. Until end of turn, double target creature's power X times.
So to kill them with a 3/3, you need to double it to 6, double it to 12, double it to 24. So you have to pay 8 mana. Mm-hmm. It's a sorcery, so in order for this to work, you have to have a flyer or a trampler. Based on the feedback I got in the written review, this is going to be one of the most overrated cards in the set because the dream is definitely there. If you have a trampler, you cast this and they just die.
Right.
If you have a flyer, you cast this and they just die. And it's like, yeah, those things can be true. This card will win some games for sure. But how many games will you have this in your hand and it's just wildly uncastable? And I think it's going to be too many for me to really want to play this card, but I do understand the appeal of it. So how many tramplers and or flyers would you need before you would consider this a good card?
I don't think that I'm in the market for paying 6, 4, or 8 mana at sorcery speed that just targets my creature. Like, I don't think you could pay me to do that. I mean, I don't think it's unplayable. I think it's pretty close.
It's quite bad. I suspect I will never play this card.
I mean, but instant speed removal exists.
Imagine a deck that had 5 tramplers in it. I mean, there is some, like...
I don't love it there, is what I'm saying. Like, I would rather have giant growth. Like, when I have no flexibility and I have to basically tap out completely at sorcery speed and be like, target my guy. Like, yeah, sometimes your opponent's just going to tap out and the shields are going to go down and you're going to get your free win. I don't mind earning my win. I don't need to have a card that just says tap a bunch of mana, you win the game. Like, I just
see it as a 2-card combo where sometimes you're going to, you know, if you have like a 4/2 trampler out, you're able to be like, all right, if I spend 6 mana, I get to attack for 16 with this. That, you know, that's the sort of thing that can steal games. And I think that it's not unreasonable to try to combo that. But I think that this is like a build around C where you shouldn't put this in your normal decks. And even in the decks where you want it, you or like the decks that you want it probably have like around 4 or so tramplers in order to really make this something that you can kind of rely on.
Okay.
So
I'm just going to give it an F. Like that. I'm planting my flag. I don't want this card. I would rather have almost any combat trick.
I understand you're never going to play it, but I do think that there are some applications for the card.
Okay.
No one's going to force you to play it, though. Don't worry.
I hope not, because I would not be happy. Gnarled Professor is next. It's 2 GG for a 5/4 Tree Folk Druid at rare. It's got trample. When Gnarled Professor enters the battlefield, learn. You better learn.
Yeah. This card's awesome. Professor Oak here.
You better learn. 5/4 trample for 4 that draws you a card, kind of?
Yeah, and you get to cast Exponential Growth on it? Like, that's awesome.
Class is in season, it says. That's fantastic. And no, I'm not going to cast Exponential Growth on the damn thing. I'm just going to turn it sideways and my opponent's going to die in a few turns. Wow. Yeah, I'm a fan of the gnarly Professor here for sure, though. That's just an A, right? It's just like
it's just an A.
Way above rate.
You don't even really have to do much to make this card good. Like,
you have to know how to turn it sideways.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Like, there's not much else going on.
No, that's about it. Real simple card. So A for Gnarled Professor. Next is Verdant Mastery. 5 and a green for a sorcery at rare. It says you may pay 3 and a green rather than pay this spell's mana cost. Search your library for up to 4 basic land cards and reveal them. Put one of them onto the battlefield tapped under an opponent's control. If the 3 and a G was paid, Put 2 of them on a battlefield tapped under your control and the rest in your hand, then shuffle.
So
I don't know if I can do it, Louise. I just cannot put one of my lands under my opponent's control that I paid the mana for here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really interested in doing this either. Like 6 mana to ramp 2 into play, 2 into your hand it's just not where you want to be. What 6 mana ramp spells you've already ramped. That's what 6 mana is.
Right.
Like so I'm not really that interested in that. So the question then becomes, okay, well, how good is it to spend 4 mana, get basically an explosive growth, right? Or, explosive vegetation, double ramp yourself, but also ramp them, and then you get a card in your hand. I don't like that deal either. They get the first crack at it.
Yeah.
So you cast this on turn 4, and then they go up to 6 mana on their turn if they were on the play. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, why did I do that again? So
right.
I would give Verdant Mastery an F. I just don't really want this card in my deck.
I would give it an F as well. It's not well suited for limited because of that alternate cost. If you are building a constructed where you can guaranteed go over the top of what your opponent's doing and it doesn't matter what they're doing, that makes sense. But here it always matters. So no. Augmenter. How do you say this? Pugilist?
I think it's Pugilist. So we're into the multicolor cards now, by the way.
Oh, this is one of the ones that's another color on the other side. Right. Yeah. Okay, so that was our last pure green card. This one happens to be green on the front. But these are double face cards, and there's a ton of them. So let's get trucking on these. This is 1 GG on the front for a 3/3 Troll Druid with Trample. It's rare. As long as you control 8 or more lands, it gets +5/+5. That's sweet. The other side, it's Echoing Equation. It's 3 blue for a sorcery. So this is a Quandrix card, obviously. Choose target creature you control. Each other creature you control becomes a copy of it until end of turn, except those creatures aren't legendary if the chosen creature is legendary. So I like the front a lot, and the back I like less. But I'll take having access to it.
The front's fantastic because it's a trained Harmadon, right? It's a 3 mana 3/3 trample, but when you hit 8 lands, all of a sudden it just becomes a force of nature. It becomes an 8/8 trample, and it's just like, oh wow, yeah, no, this card actually is awesome.
Yeah.
So a 3 mana 3/3 when you need 3 mana 3/3s, and then an 8/8 when you build up towards it. Plus, like, you get to be aware of when the 8/8's coming, so you're just like, okay, I'm 2 lands away, better stop, offering the trade.
That's right.
Whereas on turn 3, of course, you're going to offer to trade this off most of the time. Mm-hmm. So that alone, right? Just the straight up, if you're mono green, if you don't care about the blue side, you can't even cast it. You're black green, let's say. I would give Augmenter Pugilist probably a B+ because it's good. It's good early, good late. And then you look at Echoing Equation. It doesn't add that much to the equation, as it were. It's 3 blue, right? To make it all your creatures become a copy of your best creature at sorcery speed. So it's kind of like an overrun. Mm-hmm. That's okay. It will end some games.
That'll win games. Yeah.
Like you'll end up in a spot where you've got like a 3/3 flyer. Let's say you have even just the 3/1 flyer. All of a sudden, turning your whole team into 3/1 flyers. I mean, that is pretty good, right?
You could easily just end the game. I mean, having access to a card that you generally don't want to put on the stack, but when you do, it wins you the game is great upside for this card. So to me, assuming you're in Quandrix, like you can cast either side of this. I mean, this is an A to me. Like, this can steal games on the backside, but it's just rock solid creature on the front. And to me, that's amazing versatility. Yeah.
So Echoing Equation does add to the card, doesn't add maybe as much as you might think.
Right.
But the fact that you're always going to play this as the green side, I would not put this card in my deck in Prismari if I was red-blue.
That I
think would be a mistake.
But you would always put it into any green deck, right? You'd put it into green-black.
It's a must-play in Witherbloom and also in Quandrix. So I would give Augmenter Pugilist probably a B+ still. I don't think that the blue side really changes that too much, but still just a great card.
Okay, I'm going A if you can cast both sides. I really think that the other side actually does steal enough games.
Sure.
All right. Next is Blex Vexing Pest. 2 and a green for a legendary creature pest. It's mythic. It's a 3/2. Other pest bats, insects, snakes, and spiders you control get +1/+1. And when Blex dies, you gain 4 life. So it's like a super pest. On the other side, it's Search for Blex. It's 2 black for a sorcery. Again, mythic. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You would put any number of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 3 life for each card put into your hand this way. Most isn't quite as good.
Well, yeah, it's good to have though.
Good card. Good card.
That's the part I think is really sweet about the card is most of the time you're going to cast this as a 3-mana 3/2 that dies to gain 4.
Yeah.
And will actually pump the rest of your pests and whatnot, which I think is kind of cool. But sometimes you're gonna end up in a spot where you're not under life total pressure. You're playing against a control deck, or you are an aggro deck, and your opponent's not doing a good job of pressuring you. And you're just going to cast Search for Blacks, draw 3 cards, lose 9 life, and then the best 3 of your 5 cards.
Yeah,
that is pretty good. I don't think that's weak.
No, that's true. Where do you want to be? B plus B for it?
I would give Blex a B plus.
Okay.
If you can cast both sides, it's a B plus. If you can cast only the green side, it's like a C, probably a C plus. Just an okay card.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't put this in my deck to only cast the black side of it. I think that is too painful for that.
Yeah.
So B plus overall though for Blex Vexing Pest.
What about Extus Auric Overlord?
This is a banger. This is 1 white black for a 2/4 legendary human warlock at Mythic Rare. And this is like the big bad guy in the set. This is the Voldemort, though. For many reasons, you're not supposed to say his name. And it's got double strike. So it's a 2/4 double strike for 4, even though it's slightly awkward casting cost. And it has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, return target non-legendary creature from your graveyard to your hand. So, I mean, this is effectively like the Archmage, where every time you cast a spell, you draw a card. Yeah. It happens that the card you draw is a creature from your graveyard, but that's still fantastic.
That might even be better at that point in the game, right? It's a spell.
Yeah, I mean, and you know you're drawing something good.
Right.
It also has a backside, and this is Awaken the Blood Avatar, which is a very imposing card. It's 6 red-black. It's a sorcery at Mythic Rare. As an additional cost to cast it, you may sack any number of creatures, and it costs 2 colorless less for every creature that you sack in this way. So it's an 8-mana spell, but every creature you sack makes it cost 2 less, which is pretty nice. Like that definitely gets you to a more affordable place. And then what it does is each opponent sacks a creature, and you get a 3/6 red and black avatar that has haste, and when it attacks, deals 3 to each opponent.
That's pretty strong. A little confusing because it's red-black, right?
It is red-black. That part is true. I would basically always play this card for the white-black side. If you're Silver Quill, or even potentially splashing in one of the black guilds, then that, or I guess that'd just be Witherbloom. Then that could be good. But I think that you're going to end up being just really happy with this card as a 4-mana 2/4 double strike, which is just awesome. And then every time you cast a spell, you get to draw a card. Like that. I mean, this card is just a bit obscene. It's like obscene. There's not much that is going on here that's bad. Like it's huge on the board, and every time you cast a spell, you're getting a pretty big advantage. I think the Awaken the Blood Avatar part is a little bit confusing, but not something you should spend too much energy on. What I mean by that is, if I had this card in Silver Quill, I wouldn't splash it unless I had a painless way to splash it. Like, I don't know, you have like I guess there's not even, you have like a white-red duel or something. You have like a Lorehold duel or what have you. And I wouldn't really try to build around the Avatar part. Like, yes, sometimes I could see the Avatar part being good, but for the most part, I don't think it's a big part of the card. I think you're just playing it because Extus Auric Overlord is just busted.
Yeah, and it looks like an A to me.
Oh, it is an A, and sometimes you will even play the Avatar part and it will win you a game, but yeah. I think that's just not a huge part of the range here.
Right, casting is just going to be difficult in this set. What about Flame Scroll Celebrant?
This is 1 and a red for a human shaman at rare. Whenever an opponent activates an ability that isn't a mana ability, Flame Scroll Celebrant deals 1 damage to them. And you can pay 1 and a red to give it +2/+0 until end of turn.
And it's a 2/1.
And it's a 2/1. So it's a 2-mana 2/1 that is going to ping them on various, at various points. And then it also can pump to trade up. The flip side is not very good. Revel in Silence is white for an instant at rare. Your opponents can't cast spells or activate Planeswalker or Loyalty abilities this turn. Exile Revel in Silence. So that's not really something that I'm into now.
No, but the front is decent, right? The kind of fire breathing-y 2/1. looks like a C, maybe a C plus, just because you get a little bit of extra damage in for the aggressive deck.
Yeah. Sure. I would say it's a C. It's a C plus. It's a slightly better than average 2-drop that you're just not going to worry that much about, to be honest.
So we know that Quandrix is all about ramping. So how about Jazdi, Oracle of Arcavios? It's
so Jazdi
6 blue. I mean, what in the world? What does it do?
Yeah. So this card is it's 6 blue for a 5/5 legendary human wizard at Mythic. You can discard a card to return it to your hand because that's where you want it. You want your 8-drop in your hand.
It'll be there a lot.
And it has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost. And if it's a land, put it into play. So 8 mana 5/5. It does protect itself. That is one cool thing about it, right? Because you can discard a card to protect it. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't really help you on the board that much, besides just being a 5/5. Mm-hmm. And that's generally not going to be good enough.
Not at 8 mana.
When you spend 8 mana, you need something that just like immediately dominates the board, and this will certainly not do that. And then it does have Magecraft effectively draw a card and even cast it for free sometimes, or cast it for 1 mana. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that's what I'm seeing here is an 8 mana 5/5 that if I untap and have spells in hand, this card can really do something good.
That's asking a lot, yeah.
It does have a flip side, which is Journey to the Oracle. It's 2 green, so sorcery. You may put any number of land cards from your hand onto the battlefield, and then if you control 8 or more lands, you can discard a card to return this to your hand. Return Journey of the Oracle to your hand, which not a good card.
That's terrible.
4 mana to do nothing but play a bunch of extra lands is not really where I want to be. So overall, I would give Jadzi a build around D, which is to say you shouldn't put it in a normal deck. And if your ramp deck really needs a finisher, this will do powerful things. There are some games that will be won by this card. On balance, you shouldn't put this card in your deck, though.
No, 8 mana is just too much, even if you're ramping. It also, the setup cost is too high after.
I mean, compare this to Bookworm, right? We liked Bookworm a lot.
Yep.
This doesn't gain you life. It doesn't draw you a card. Right. So if you untap with it, it's going to be quite a bit more powerful. So
I mean, theoretically, it's hard to have that much left in hand by the time you get to this point, right? Like,
maybe this is a build around C.
Sure, build around C. I mean, I want to cast the damn thing, and it's cute.
There's a lot of ramp. If you end up with a deck that is really good at ramping, this is the kind of card that like is a payoff for that. Mm-hmm. So I think that you can build a deck where this is good, but you just shouldn't put this in your deck under most circumstances.
There you go. Kian, Dean of Substances, 2 and a green for a legendary elf druid. It's a 2/2 at rare. You can tap it to exile the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it into your hand. Otherwise, put a study counter on it. You can pay 4 and a green to create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana value among non-land cards you own in exile with study counters on them. Are you serious right now?
Well, that's only half the card. It's a flip card. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
This is just like ridiculous. The other side is Imbraham, Dean of Theory. It's 2 blue for a 3/3 legendary bird wizard with flying. Okay, I like this. You can pay X blue, tap it to exile the top X cards of your library and put a study counter on each of them. Then you may put a card you own in exile with a study counter on it into your hand.
So the funny thing about these deans, there's a cycle of deans here, which is they end up in a spot where they kind of play well with each other, but it doesn't really matter because you're only going to have one. That's more of a constructed thing. You're only going to have access to one side of these at once. Mm-hmm. So Kian, Dean of Substance, I think is quite good. A 3 mana 2/2 that lets you tap. It's a kind of and draw the card if it's a land.
So it's Green Seeker.
So it's a Dryad Green Seeker, 3 mana 2/2. That would already be good. But it also has the ability to pay 5 to start making like 2/2s or 3/3s or however big the fractals are. It just depends on how many times you've used the ability. So a 3 mana 2/2 that finds lands early and can be a creature engine late. That's great. I would play this in any green deck. I would give it a B+.
Same. And it's also worth noting that you can do both in the same turn. One of them's a tap ability. The other one's pay 4 and a green.
Exactly. And then Imbraham, the Dean of Theory, that's, well, like you said, a 4 mana 3/3 flyer, so already good. And then X blue tap to exile the top X and draw the best one of them. That's quite strong. Mm-hmm. Plus, let's say you use this you spent 5 mana, you exiled 3 cards, you drew the best one. Next turn, if you use it again, you already have the 2 previous cards exiled, and you can still choose from those.
Oh,
so
that's pretty cool.
You can even spend only 2 mana on this. Because let's say the first turn you spend 4 mana, you exile 2 cards, put 1 in hand. Next turn you can spay blue tap and just put the other card into your hand.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing. This card's really strong. I mean, it is the wordiest, most complicated.
No, we haven't gotten to some of the other deals, so I wouldn't say that yet.
Okay, so can we give Kian an A then?
I would just give this card overall an A. Mm-hmm. If you can only cast the blue side, it's still an A. If you can only cast the green side, it's more like a B+.
B+. That's what I was thinking too. What about Mila Crafty Companion?
This is 1 white for a 2/3 legendary fox at Mythic Rare. Mm-hmm. Whenever an opponent attacks one or more planeswalkers you control, put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. Okay. Whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card.
That's nice. That ability matters. Yep.
And then the flip side is a planeswalker. It's Luca, Wayward Bonder. 4 red for a 5 loyalty planeswalker. It's a Luca. +1, discard a card. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. If you discarded a creature this way, draw 2 cards. -2, return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of your next upkeep. So this can put a blocker into play if you want.
Okay.
And -7, you get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. So,
and that's an attainable ultimate here as well.
Yeah, you play this at 5, it ticks up to 6, ticks up to 7, and then ults. Yeah, I mean, both sides of this card are playable on their own. Like, Mila is a 3 mana 2/3 that's going to draw you a card at the very least, assuming that you don't have to trade it away in combat, because they're going to have to use something to get rid of it. And can be really annoying if they don't have a way to get rid of it, but they have other spells that they want to cast on your stuff. And then Luca doesn't do the best job in the world of protecting himself. You can -2 to put a blocker into play, but that doesn't give you like really much permanent advantage. But still, the +1 to draw cards and then the ultimate that's going to be really hard to beat means that overall Luca's pretty good. So I would give Mila a B and Luca probably a B. If you can only cast one side. Sure. If you can cast either side in red-white, it probably gets you closer to like an A-, just because having the option between a good 3-drop and a good 6-drop at once is a pretty significant upgrade.
Yeah, I would say just straight up A for the card if you're in Lorehold, but I agree with your separate grades. Yeah. Next is Pestilent Cauldron. This is 2 and a black for an artifact, and it has 3 different abilities because of course it does. Tap, discard a card, create a 1/1. You get a pest. I'm just going to shortcut that. You can pay 1 and tap it to have each opponent mill cards equal to the amount of life you gained this turn. And you can pay 4 and tap it to exile 4 cards from a single graveyard and draw a card. So that means that there has to be actually 4 cards, right? It's not up to, so that's a little tricky. Then the other side is Restorative Burst. It's 3 GG for a sorcery, again rare. Return up to 2 target creature, land, and or planeswalker cards from your graveyard to your hand. Each player gains 4 life, and then you exile Restorative Burst. So let's see. The front side, you can discard cards to turn them into pests. And then there's some weird mill stuff going on, and then maybe you can draw a card every once in a while by paying 4 mana. That seems medium. Restorative Burst, 5 mana sorcery, basically get 2 creatures back from your graveyard, and then everybody gains 4. Well, the gain 4 certainly helps in that case, because even if it's your opponent, even if you're giving some to your opponent, it gives you time to actually deploy those 2 creatures that you just spent 5 mana sorcery speed to get in your hand. So that seems okay too. This seems a lot weaker though than the ones that we were just looking at, than Kian or.
So I would give the Cauldron a C. Yeah. If you could cast the Cauldron, I would give the Burst a B. And I think the combination of the two, like in Witherbloom, is probably like a B+, because most of the time you're going to cast Restorative Burst. It's just a stronger card. But sometimes if it's the late game, the Cauldron can act as a draw engine / way to stall things out, plus an actual win condition. If you can gain some life, you can start milling them for 3 or 4, which then fuels the draw engine and whatnot. So overall, I would probably give this card a B+. And then it's certainly, better if you can cast both halves. I would not tend to put it in my deck if I could only cast the Cauldron. Yeah. So that would be Silver Quill. Whereas I would play Restorative Burst and Quandrix. This fits pretty nicely into a ramp deck.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll go B on Pestilent Cauldron / Restorative Burst. I am less impressed, and that's saying a lot because I really like cards that give you a lot of options. What about Plarg, Dean of Chaos?
Plarg is a 1 and a red for a 2/2 Orc Shaman at rare. Tap, discard a card to draw a card. All right, not bad.
Okay.
And then 4 red tap. Reveal cards from the top card of your, or from your library, from the top of your library, until you reveal a non-legendary, non-land card with mana value 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put the revealed cards not cast this way in the bottom of your library on a random order. So it's a 2-mana 2/2 Rummager, which would already get a C+ from me. That's already great. Mm-hmm. And then if you have a bunch of mana lying around, you can pay 5 and tap it and cast the next 3-mana card from your deck.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's like drawing it, right? You're paying a premium, but you're getting the card and casting it. So there you go. And
then the flip side is Augusta, Dean of Order. She's 2 and a white for a 1/3 human cleric. Other tapped creatures you control get +1/+0. Other untapped creatures you control get +0/+1. Whenever you attack, untap each creature you control, then tap any number of creatures you control. So basically, you get to attack. You declare your 3 creatures as attackers. You untap them all. And then if you want, you can tap some of them because it just depends. Do you want the toughness or the power?
Right.
So at the very least, it does give all your attackers vigilance. If you don't want to tap them, you can just make all your attackers attack, all untapped. Makes all your creatures better while blocking and not better while attacking. Just depends on, again, which bonus you want. The fact that you get to choose is pretty good. So Plarg is great. Always played in any red deck. Augusta is good in any white deck, though, if you're really creature light, which seems unlikely, but if you were really creature light, she does fade a little bit. Overall, I think this card is probably pretty close to an A.
I was going to say B+, but I don't know.
I mean, Plarg is a good engine card to make sure you always have something to do with your mana. You always have access to cards. And then on a wide board, Augusta can be a pretty good way to pump your whole team.
Okay. B+ trending towards A- for Plarg.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. What about Rowan, Scholar of Sparks?
Double-sided Planeswalker. So this is 2 and a red for legendary Planeswalker Rowan at Mythic Rare. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. +1, Rowan, Scholar of Sparks, deals 1 damage to each opponent. If you've drawn 3 or more cards this turn, she deals 3 damage to each opponent instead. -4, you get an emblem that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 2. If you do, copy it, and you may choose new targets. So this is not a very impressive Planeswalker this side, because it's a 3-mana 2-loyalty Planeswalker whose +1 pings them for 1. That's basically it. And then the -4 is good, but how are you getting to -4? You have to have stabilized the board, and even then you have to have spells and mana, though it is a powerful emblem to have. Mm-hmm. And then making all your spells cost 1 less is just okay. So I'm not really in for Rowan, Scholar of Sparks, but you also have Will, Scholar of Frost. He's 4 and a blue for a 4-loyalty Planeswalker, Will. Instant sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. +1, up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 0/2 until your next turn. So this is the defensive ability. You plus it on their 5/5, it stays at 0/2 until your next turn, so can't attack Will. -3, draw 2 cards. All right, pretty simple. Okay. 5 mana, 4 loyalty, you can immediately -3 it to draw 2. And then -7, exile up to 5 target permanents. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental. So mostly what you're going to do with the ultimate, I think, is just exile all your lands and turn them into 4/4s. Yeah. And then just hope that closes out the game. So if I was blue, I would always play Will, because play Will, plink their biggest creature, they can't attack it. Then next turn, you can maybe deploy another creature and then -3 to draw 2 cards to have some good defense. Rowan, yeah, you would cast this card sometimes if you were red-blue, but really you shouldn't put this card in your deck for Rowan. It's just not a good card to cast, and I certainly wouldn't put Rowan in my deck if I was playing red-white and couldn't cast the blue side, whereas Will's going to be good in a Quandrix deck. So basically, Will, Scholar of Frost, I think, gets an A-, and then Rowan gets a D, and then the combined one is still an A- because you're just not going to cast Rowan very often.
Right. So A- for double Planeswalker card, which is actually kind of a relief, because if they had gone super hard on both Planeswalkers, it could be a bit much. Selfless Glyph Weaver is 2 and a white for a 2/3 human cleric. It's rare. Exile Selfless Glyph Weaver. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Okay. That's a useful ability sometimes. The other side is called Deadly Vanity, and it's expensive. It's 5 black, black, black. It's a sorcery at rare. It says, choose a creature or planeswalker, then destroy all other creatures and planeswalkers. Ooh.
I really like this card because for 3 mana, you get a pretty good little 2/3 because you can always basically sack the Glyph Weaver to save something else.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can save multiple things, but mostly it's just going to be like, oh, you're trying to kill my 5/5, I'll sack this.
Yep.
But because your opponent's not really going to get into massive combats and you have this in play, at least they shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And then the flip side, Deadly Vanity is a card that's going to win you the game a large percentage of the times you cast it. And the sweet part is in Black-White, in Silverquill, you basically get to free roll this 8 mana spell on a already playable 3 mana 2/3. So you're going to cast this as Selfless Glyph Weaver 4 out of 5 times, but 1 out of 5 times Deadly Vanity is going to win you the game.
That's right. It is an instant win if you get to put that card on the stack and it resolves, for sure.
I would give the Glyph Weaver probably a B, but I would also play it in a Lorehold deck. I would just put this card in my deck. Mm-hmm. And I would give Deadly Vanity, like by itself, it's like a build around B because you have to build to ramp to this, which could be a Witherbloom deck that has some of the green ramp because it's a really powerful card.
It is.
But overall, I would give this card probably it's still just a B+. I don't think I'm quite at A- if you combine the two in Silverquill.
Yeah, it's just nice that they gave us a pretty high floor and then a really high ceiling, but it's just you don't have to hit that ceiling to make the card worth it. Shale, Dean of Radiance is next. It's 1 and a white for a legendary bird cleric. It's a 1/1 flying vigilance. So 2 mana 1/1 flying vigilance, sure. But it has tap, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. That's pretty strong. I mean, you can even chip in there for 1 and then activate it after. And, every creature that you cast, or even multiple creatures that you cast for the rest of the game, you just tap this thing and start pumping them up. And at only 2 mana, it's actually on the battlefield when you cast the majority of your other creatures. The other side is Embrose, Dean of Shadow. This is 2 black for a 4/4 human warlock that says tap, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature, then Embrose, Dean of Shadow deals 2 damage to that creature. And it says whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, you draw a card.
See, if the creature's too weak, his lesson kills it. But if it's strong enough,
but you learn something from it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Both of these sides are great. I would unquestionably play both Shale and Embrose in decks that could not cast the other side. So, with that we're talking Lorehold and Witherbloom both would play these cards for their respective side. Mm-hmm. The combination's even better. So I would give this card just a straight up A.
Yeah,
both sides are fantastic, and the combination is very, very good. I mean, Embrose is like tap. It's kind of like tap, sack a small creature, draw a card, or tap, pump a creature, or in some cases both. You've got a 3/3 and they attack. You block with your 3/3 on their 4/4. Give your creature a counter. They trade off, and then you draw a card. Mm-hmm. Like your opponent's not going to set you up that way, but sometimes they might not have a choice. So both of these cards are quite strong.
And he just taps to kill 1 toughness creatures on the other side as well.
Yes.
You don't draw a card or anything. But
you don't draw a card, but he can just ping 1 toughness creatures away, definitely.
Yeah, so there you go. Torrent Sculptor is next. It's 2 blue for a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard. This one's rare. It has Ward 2, so again, whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, they have to pay 2 mana, or else the ability gets countered. When Torrent Sculptor enters the battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on Torrent Sculptor equal to half that card's mana value rounded up. Nice. So it just picks up some counters. And then the other side is Flamethrower Sonata. It is 1 and a red for a sorcery. It says discard a card, then draw a card. When you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, it deals damage equal to that card's mana value to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Okay. Yeah, there's some stuff going on here.
Yeah, this is one of those cards where I wouldn't be thrilled to play either side without the other side, just because I think that neither card is like super, super exciting, but they're both pretty good. And I think overall Torrent Sculptor and Flamethrower gets a B. You do need a lot of spells. Both of them require quite a few spells in order to work.
Yeah, they both fit really well, of course, into Prismari, which is where this card's designed to be, but you can see how it would work. The one thing to not get fooled on, by the way, on Flamethrower or Sonata, because it feels kind of free, right? You go play it, discard some big sorcery, kill a creature, so you're like, great, and then you draw your card, but then you don't get that spell anymore. It does cost you that. But you are getting card advantage. I mean, you get to kill a creature and draw a card, so that's pretty sweet. It's just
it's card parity if you kill a creature.
Card parity is what I should say. Yeah,
but it's pretty bad if you're not killing a creature.
It's very, very.
If you're using this as a looting effect, it's pretty bad. But yes, it ends up being even if you kill a creature, which is fine. Yeah, I would just give this whole package a B. I wouldn't. The thing is, in a deck with tons of spells, you could play only one of the sides, but that's kind of hard to end up there without being red-blue exactly, and that's where you want to focus on this card. Right.
Speaking of red-blue, this next one is the same. It's Uvilda, Dean of Perfection. This one's 2 and a blue for a 2/2 legendary Djinn wizard at rare, and it says tap. That's the easy part.
This is the one I'm thinking about, by the way, when I told you not to get ahead of yourself.
I just don't know if I can do this. So tap. You may exile an instant or sorcery card from your hand and put 3 hone counters on it. It gains, quote, at the beginning of your upkeep, this card is exiled. If this card is exiled, remove a hone counter from it. And, quote, when the last hone counter is removed from this card, if it's exiled, you may cast it. It costs 4 less to cast it. You could have just given it to me for free. I have to do math after all of that.
Also,
that is amazing. That's all after just tap.
Also, it's just not a good ability. The ability here
I wouldn't know. What does it do?
You tap and exile a spell from your hand, and then you can play it 3 turns later at a discounted mana cost. Oh, God.
You couldn't just give it to me for free. Come on.
No, it's not good. It's not good. And then the flip side is Nasari, Dean of Expression. We'll split this one up, so one of us doesn't have to read the whole thing.
Thank you.
This is a 3 red for a 4/4 Freak Shaman. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of each opponent's library. To end a turn, you may cast spells from among those exiled cards and spend mana as if it were any color to cast them. And whenever you cast a spell from exile, put a +1/+1 counter on Nasari. So in this, we use spells kind of interchangeably to mean instants and sorceries. In this case, it just means non-lands. Mm-hmm. So this exiles their top card each turn, and then until end of turn, you could cast it. And yeah, that is a good place to be. I think Nasari is quite strong. A 5-mana 4/4 that lets you cast spells off your opponent's deck is very strong.
That's really good. It's basically drawing you an extra card that's not a land. Yeah, that's nice.
Right, and gets a +1/+1 counter for your troubles.
Yeah.
Uvilda is not strong. A 3-mana 2/2 that lets you slowly get mana value, a mana advantage out of your spells is not good. So basically, this card gets an A- from me just as a 5-mana 4/4 that grows and draws extra cards. Mm-hmm. And the blue side, I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but it's really not a card that I'm particularly looking to play in my deck.
Right. This is the thing that you're trying to set up those 7-mana instants and sorceries we were talking about, where you're like, haha, I'm going to, pitch one of them to Uvilda, and then I'll have it on the same turn I would have, but I'll have extra mana left over or something like that, or I won't have to hit all my land drops, or, it can take a little bit of the pressure off of that. But I mean, you're paying a 3-mana 2/2 here. That's a big cost to put that card in your deck. So
the biggest cost is that you're not playing the red side.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Because the red side's really good. So I would give Nasari an A-. And then, yes, it is better to have the option to play Uvilda than not, but you're probably not going to play the blue side very often.
All right. Our last of these absurd double-face cards, Valentine, Dean of the Vein. This is black for a 1/1 legendary vampire warlock with menace and lifelink. And it says, if a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. If you do, you may pay 2. If you do, create a 1/1 black and green pest token.
How many if you do's does a card need? What? Jeff can confirm it for us later, our producer. I believe it's called taking the piss. Is that what it's called?
The Dean of the Vein. Oh God. All right. What's the other
The other half is Lisette, Dean of the Root. She's 2 green for a 4/4 human druid. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, put a ++1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn. So, as it turns out, both sides are very good because a 1-mana 1/1 menace lifelink is actually pretty sweet. And then later in the game, Valentine just sits on the board, and whenever one of your opponent's creatures dies, you can just pay 2 to cast a pest. Pretty good.
That's pretty good.
And then, but you're going to cast this as Lisette most of the time. 4-mana 4/4 that every time you gain life, your whole team gets a +1/+1 counter. I mean, that is just awesome.
That is, and in the color pair particularly that does make a bunch of pests, that's going to add up even incidentally. And then we did see other ways to gain life as well. So this combo of cards is good.
Yeah, I think you're likely going to play Valentine, Dean of the Vein in Silverquill even without being able to cast Lisette, and Lisette is, I think, of course, great in Quandrix. So overall, again, I would give this card probably an A. I think Lisette's just an A straight up in any deck that can gain life, and then having the Valentine option is pretty good too.
So A for that card. All right. Some more normal gold cards now. This is Beladros Witherbloom. This is 5 black-green for a 4/4 legendary Elder Dragon at Mythic Rare. It does have flying, as you might imagine, but boy, this thing better be amazing. This is a 7-mana 4/4 flyer. It says at the beginning of each upkeep, so yours and theirs, you get a pest. And you can pay 10 life to untap all lands you control, but only activate the ability once each turn. Whoa, that's kind of cool. I don't like seeing stuff like that, to be honest, because I don't like it any time that you can exchange life for mana, for example. That's traditionally not worked out particularly well for the game, but at least it's half your life here. Yeah,
it's a 7-mana 4/4 flyer that makes a pest every turn is something I'm pretty interested in playing. It's a good card because
it's a great card. Right?
Yeah, you play this and immediately get a pest on their turn.
Yeah,
which gives you a lot of extra leeway when it comes to chumping. And then the pay 10 life part, probably going to use that, once out of every 4 games when you have this card in play?
Yeah, I mean, if you're at 15 life and turn 7, you have 4 cards in hand, and you go Beladros Witherbloom, untap all my stuff, play 2 more cards or play another card. That could be a thing. And then, if you don't feel you can get burned out from that point, that's an explosive turn to say the least.
Yeah.
Great card. I mean, you need to ramp towards it. It is 7 mana, but I mean, this is an A to me, a pretty easy one as well. The pests are just going to carry over or get carried away,
Certainly an A for Beladros Witherbloom.
Yep. Next is Blade Historian, and this is 4 hybrid, and they're red or white. So you can pay 4 red, 4 white, or any combination of red or white. It's a human cleric. It's a 2/3 rare, and it says attacking creatures you control have double strike. Crazy. It's also insane because, while this mana cost looks really intimidating when you see it, you're like, oh man, 4 mana symbols, there's no generic mana to be seen. If you're just straight up playing Lorehold, it's just colorless. It doesn't matter. You could draw any combination of your lands as long as they produce red or white, and you can get this thing on the battlefield on turn 4.
Yeah, that's the really cool thing about hybrid cards.
Yeah,
is you end up in a spot where in a blue red or white black deck, this card's exceedingly difficult to cast. It's a quad colored card, right? You're like, wow, how am I actually going to cast this card? Whereas in a white red deck, it costs 4 colorless to cast effectively. you always get to cast the card. So
right, these cards are beating too.
Oh, totally. For these hybrid cards, I would basically look at them as red, white, gold cards where, yes, you can technically play them outside the color pair, but you're talking very uncastable once you get to that point.
Yeah.
In that color pair, though, I would give Blade Historian an A. You play this card and attack with everything, and they're like, oh, what do I do now? And it's also when it attacks, it's going to be a 2/3 double strike. That's pretty solid attacker.
It is. And imagine, of course, any flying, any type of pump spells, any of that stuff just gets completely out of hand. So there you go. There's Blade Historian, and it's going to end up in this college every time, basically. These come around way later too, right? Because it's just if there's 3 people passing to you and they're not specifically in red, white, then you're going to get it. And that's really powerful thing to get late.
Yeah.
Blot Out the Sky is next. It's black, white, X for a sorcery. It's mythic rare. It says create X tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature tokens with flying. If X is 6 or more, destroy all non-creature, non-land permanents.
That part is not really going to come up too often. It just blows up all artifacts and enchantments.
Okay.
Mostly what's going to come up is the fact that your opponent's going to die because you're going to spend 6 mana and put 4/2/1 flyers into play.
That's right.
They are tapped, so you can't block with them. So that's not to say this card's anything but excellent, but it won't save you. Like, this is the kind of card where you play your 8 mana spell, and it actually doesn't do a good job of keeping you alive, which is funny.
Right, and that is a knock when you're spending a lot of mana on a card. But the raw power that you get out of this, especially, I mean, you could just cast it for 4, right? Like, get 2 1/1 flyers, go.
There's no mana value at which this card is bad. I mean,
exactly.
Obviously, if you cast it for 3, obviously you're going to be disappointed because you would rather cast this card for any other value. But there's no mana value where it's not a pretty good deal.
That's right. Yeah, I like A for Blot Out the Sky. I just think that's fantastic. I'm not going A+, but I'm going A.
Yeah, I would go A+. This is going to be kind of like Starnheim Unleashed, where on 5 mana you make 3 2/1 flyers. Your opponent, what are they going to do with that? They're just going to die.
But that's the difference. Is that if somebody did that with Starnheim Unleashed, you could not die that turn. And here, you absolutely can get ran over if you take a big turn to tap out for Blot Out the Sky, and they go Blade Historian, attack you with everything like you're dead. Where A pluses like Starnheim Unleashed, that isn't the case. So that's why I draw that distinction. Like, to me, this is closer to an A- than an A+, but I still just give it an A. Just for
I think I would give this an A+. I think that this card is just going to be – it's too hard to beat at too many different mana costs, I think, overall.
Fair enough. Body of Research is next. It's GGGUUU. So 3 green and 3 blue mana. It's sorcery. It's mythic rare. It says create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. Put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of cards in your library.
Yeah, this card's sweet. So I don't actually think this card's good, unfortunately.
I mean, triple green, triple blue is pretty rough.
So a 6 mana vanilla creature, how big does that have to be for you to be like, wow? I mean, this is going to be a 15/15 a lot of the time, but I don't think that usually changes that much. Like a 15/15, a 20/20 are like, they're not identical, but they're not functionally that different.
Yeah, for me, I think the inflection points are like 7 and 10, right? Like 7 is a 3-turn clock, 10 is a 2-turn clock, and then I guess 20 would be the other thing. Maybe it's probably closer to, say, 17 or 18 because, oftentimes you'll be able to get in for a couple of damage. It's basically just how many times can my opponent chump this before it's lethal, right? So like, do you have to chump this or not is a question,
Yeah, and the fact that it costs triple is a real big knock against it.
It's really tough.
Well, when your 6 mana spell is just not something you can reliably cast, that's really dangerous because then you start entering the phase of like, oh, what am I going to do when I draw 6 but not enough to actually cast this specific card? And you're going to end up being pretty unhappy when that's the case with this card. So, yeah, I would say that Body of Research probably gets a C from me. In straight blue-green, you should probably put it in your deck, but it's not a bomb just because some of the time they're going to kill it. Some of the time you're just not going to be able to cast it. And, when that happens, you're going to be pretty unhappy with the result.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. This is not a six mana play. You know what I mean? Like turn 6, that ain't it.
Yeah.
What about Culling Ritual?
So this is 2 green black for a sorcery. Destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. Add black or green mana for each permanent destroyed this way. So mainly what this does is it kills all tokens.
Okay.
It kills all the different tokens that you summon with the different token summonings. And then it also kind of gives you a rebate. Sometimes it'll give you a couple mana back. Sometimes you'll blow up some of your own pests and gain a bunch of mana that way. It can also kill, obviously, like 1s and 2 drops. I think overall this card is fine, but it's not great. I think that most decks will have access to tokens, so I would always play the card. But it's not like Culling Ritual is going to be like one of the better cards in your deck. It's fairly situational still. Where sometimes it's going to kill 2 of their 4/4 elemental tokens, and then one of their other creatures, and you're going to be like, this cost 1 mana, it killed those 3. That is busted.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, well, I can cast this, kill one of my creatures, one of their creatures. That's not so good.
Yeah. Any consideration to sideboard?
Certainly a great sideboard card. I would main deck it though.
You would?
I think that there's enough token making, and because of lessons, you can always pull the summonings out of your graveyard, or sorry, out of your sideboard. So people have access to Inkling summonings all the time, right?
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I would give Color Ritual C+. I'm just not over the moon about it.
Okay, yeah, that seems good. Culmination of Studies. This is one of the cards that we previewed. It's blue-red X for a sorcery. It's rare. It says exile the top X cards of your library. For each land card exiled this way, create a treasure token. For each blue card exiled this way, draw a card. For each red card exiled this way, Culmination of Studies deals 1 damage to each opponent. So for every land you get a treasure. For every blue card you draw a card. For every red card you ding your opponent. This is a really cool card and a kind of an interesting place to put a bunch of mana. But I don't think I'm going to be playing this in limited anytime soon.
No. Imagine you spent 8 mana on this, right? So you exiled 6 cards.
Yeah.
You're probably going to exile 2 to 4 lands, probably most likely 2 or 3, right, is the most common number.
Yeah.
So you get a couple treasures. If you're lucky, 2 blue cards, 1 red card, and draw 2 and ping them for 1. If you're unlucky, 2 red cards and 1 blue card.
Right. Because the red cards are almost zeros in most scenarios, unless you have your opponent nearly dead. And then the treasure is nice, but if you don't use it right away, you just dumped 8 mana into this thing. It's not like you're short on mana. So then it becomes a card draw spell that you have no control over whatsoever, and that's not where you want to be. So
part of what's cute is when you exile a red and blue gold card, you get both.
Right.
But the red ability is still not worth anything, is the problem.
That's the problem.
You're just not getting much out of it. This looks like an F to me.
I think it's just
I don't see how you get enough mana value out of this, regardless of at what point you play it, right?
Right, exactly. That's the problem. Demagoth Titan is...
I think it's Demagoth, but I have no idea.
I'm going to go Demagoth Titan. This is 4 mana, and they're all green-black hybrid. So any combination of green and or black mana, totaling 4. And for that, you get an 11/10. It's a 4 mana 11/10 demon at rare. Whenever Demagoth Titan attacks or blocks, sacrifice a creature. So, how many pests can you get on the battlefield before this thing hits and start jamming with it? Because it's a freaking 11/10. It is actually just huge.
Yeah, I think Demagoth Titan's a house. I think that the average green-black deck will be very happy to have this, because one thing that's present with this card that hasn't been in a lot of similar cards, this doesn't eat a creature every upkeep. It's when it attacks or blocks. Mm-hmm. You can just pump the brakes if you want. Mm-hmm. You're not forced to attack with this every turn, certainly not forced to block with it. So you can easily end up in a spot where, this card's costly to use, but hey, what if you're going to summon some pests next turn? Just don't attack with it for a turn. And then when you do have pests to feed it, this kills them in 2 hits and then starts forcing chump blockers.
Right. I don't know. If you can sustain it, I guess you need a high number of creatures and or ways to make expendable creatures like pests. But if you can, you cannot argue with 4 mana 11/10. That is a significant thing to have on the battlefield at that stage of the game. It's going to be bigger than anything else.
There's also the uncommon that lets you sack a creature to make a pest equal to its power, which is a little Mondo combo where I'd definitely play both cards if I had that.
For sure.
Yeah, I think overall Demagoth Titan, it looks like an A- to me. This card just hits so hard.
Man, it's just the times when you can't do anything. If it does whittle itself down, if you just have one of those bad draws. I'm going to go... Man, I'm skeptical. I'm going to go B.
All right. I think that I don't think it's going to be that hard to build it to where this card's awesome. Yeah, okay. You're going to get owned by removal every now and then, but I think for the most part the Titan is going to be a very, very good reason to be in Witherbloom.
Okay, there you go. Double Major is next. It's blue-green for an instant. It's rare. It says copy target creature spell you control, except it isn't legendary if that spell is legendary. So basically this tacks on an additional 2 mana to any creature spell that you're wanting to put on the stack. But if you have this card and the extra 2 mana, you get another one of those creatures. So presumably for a heavy discount, but it's at the cost of adding 2 mana to the creatures. So yeah.
Yeah, this looks like an F to me. I just don't think you can afford to to put an extra 2 mana on the cost of a creature, because cloning your own creatures is good, but having to wait this long to clone something, I think is going to end up being just way too costly.
I do too. It's also 2 individual colors of mana in the cost, so it makes it that much harder on that front. Also, it scales in the way that you don't want it to, where you could conceivably copy a 2 mana creature with this pretty easily, but that's not where the power is. It's when you are only paying 2 mana to get an extra 5 mana worth of creature, but now you're in that predicament that we just described. So, I would give it probably just an F. I just don't think I would play double major.
I agree.
Okay. Dramatic Finale is the black-white 4 mana hybrid card. It's an enchantment. It says creature tokens you control get +1/+1. And whenever one or more non-token creatures you control dies, you get a 2/1 white and black inkling creature token with flying, but it can only trigger once per turn. But still, whenever one of your creatures dies, it gets replaced by a 2/1 flyer? Like
3/2 flyer.
A 3/2 flyer? Right. Oh my God.
I believe Dramatic Finale is an A+. I don't understand how you could win a long game against this card.
Right.
Because imagine they go, 2-drop, 3-drop, play this on turn 4. Now, all of a sudden, the first time you kill one of their creatures, they get a 3/2 flying, and that's just going to be true the rest of the game.
Yeah, no way. I want heavy creature deck. I want 15, 16, 17 creatures to make Dramatic Finale. And I'm talking about actual creatures, not token-making creatures, to make this really hum. But I'm with you. I don't see how you can lose if you have that situation, Your opponent has to go through this one way or the other, and it's just going to end up killing you. So I like A for Dramatic Finale. I give it a tentative build around because, look, I think you would put it in basically any limited deck, but I think for it to get to that peak, you really do need to make sure you have enough creatures. Like you just, put a random dork in your deck over a combat trick or whatever to make sure that your creature count's high enough to make Dramatic Finale like unbeatable rather than just amazing.
Definitely.
What about Elemental Expressionist?
So this is 4 blue-red hybrid mana. This is the Prismari one. Mm-hmm. And what this does is it's an Orc Wizard. It's a 4/4 at rare. Magecraft. When you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, choose target creature you control. Until end of turn, it gains, quote, if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. And, quote, when you exile this creature, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token.
So it's actually similar to Dramatic Finale. Wait.
So what this does, it's a 4 mana 4/4.
Yeah, okay.
And then every time you Magecraft, one of your creatures gains basically a death trigger of making a 4/4.
And that isn't until end of turn, or is that until end of turn?
Until end of turn.
Okay.
Can't you see? It's just right in the middle of the paragraph.
Yeah, there's a lot of text there, so I kind of got lost. Okay, so a use case is you have this out, you say go, your opponent plays a thing or plays land, says go, and then they want to kill one of your other creatures, and then in response you cast an instant of some sort. And then when their removal spell resolves, then you get
the
a 4/4.
rebate of a 4/4.
Okay, I mean, that seems okay. This thing doesn't have any type of evasion, and that's pretty finicky to set up.
Mostly, I would give it a B+ because it's a 4 mana 4/4 in blue-red that is trivially easy to cast. That's like the majority of what is going on with this.
With some upside.
And it has some upside. Not a huge amount of upside because, again, how are you setting this up such that it's really going to be very effective? And my answer is I don't know, but it's got some upside. I'll give it that.
Okay. So you said B+?
Yeah, I like
for
B+
Elemental Expressionist. I'll go B. Seems fine. What about Galazeth Prismari?
So this is the Elder Dragon. This is 2 blue-red for 3/4 flying. It's a mythic rare. When it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. And artifacts you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast instants or sorcery spells.
So your treasure taps to just add mana now?
So basically it's a 4 mana 3/4 flyer, which is obviously just great. And then you get a treasure, but then now your treasures can tap to cast spells instead of sack to cast spells.
Okay. Great.
Which, that part is like not a huge deal.
No.
Right. So, but the fact is that you get a 4-mana 3/4 flyer, which is like an A- level card already, and it gives you a treasure, which means even if you don't have spells to cast, you can still ramp out like, a 6-drop on turn 5 after playing this.
Right. Yeah, great. A. I would give Galazeth Prismari an A.
Yeah, that seems fine.
Solid card for 4 mana. Next is called Harness Infinity. It is 1 and black, green, green, green. So 7 mana, really tough to cast. It is an instant. It's mythic. This is just wild. It says exchange your hand and graveyard, exile Harness Infinity.
I like this card. I think this card is sweet. Yeah. So Harness Infinity is not an easy card to cast. And I actually think it's not particularly good, but it is a sweet card. So it's 7 mana to basically draw your entire graveyard. And at the cost, of course, is you have to discard your hand. The main problem I have with that is that by the time you get to 7 mana, it's kind of asking you to have a fully stocked graveyard. Okay, that's not too hard. Mostly an empty hand because you don't really want to discard your hand or exchange it. But also, it's the same as the other cards that cost this mana cost. You have to have triple of each color. Yeah. And sometimes you draw 5 forests and 2 swamps. You're on 7 mana, and you're like, I can't cast this card. And that part really sucks,
Yeah, this is a card for dreamers. I'll say that. Also, it does not alter your maximum hand size.
It definitely does not. So I would give Harness Infinity an F. I just don't think that's the place you want to be.
Let's just go F on Harness Infinity. What about Hoffrey Ghost Forge?
This is 3 red white for a 4/5 mythic rare. It's a dwarf cleric. Spirits you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. Whenever another non-token creature you control dies, exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. So basically, all your creatures, all your other creatures die twice.
They die into themselves, but they're improved. Wow.
And they get +1/+1, trample, and haste when they do. And then when the creature dies, it goes back into your graveyard, but that's not really a big part of the card. Like, it doesn't matter too much.
That's just kind of housekeeping.
Yeah, I mean, the main problem with cards like this, same with the Elemental Expressionist, the blue-red card, is mostly this creature's going to die before your other creatures. Right? There's no real reason for that to be different. But it's still a very sweet card.
Yeah. It lets you offer trades a lot more liberally. It also does give +1/+1 trample and haste to any spirits you have on the battlefield. This can be one of those things where you go Ghost Forge, go to combat, and they're like, oh crap, the team just got pumped up and blah, blah, blah. It's a great card. I mean, I agree with you that it's a bit of a lightning rod and they'll just kill it. But like, if they don't, probably going to lose.
Sometimes they can't kill it and then they have to try to beat it in combat and they can't. Right. Sometimes they don't have a way to kill a 4/5, so they have to just use removal on cheaper creatures, and that doesn't work out well either. Right. I would give Hoffrey an A. Just a 5 mana 4/5 that if it's on the battlefield, your opponent's going to have a hard time winning is just a really good card.
Yep. I like A for Hoffrey Ghost Forge. Here's Kasmina, Enigma Sage. This is 1 green-blue for a 2 loyalty legendary Planeswalker Kasmina at Mythic. Each other Planeswalker you control has the loyalty abilities of Kasmina, Enigma Sage. Okay, so not really relevant for us. +2 is Scry 1. So 3 mana, 2 loyalty, up to 4 Scry 1. So minimal impact, but it is a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. -X, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, put X +1/+1 counters on it. So I guess you could just turn this into a 2/2 fractal if you really wanted right away. And then there is an ultimate of -8, which is quite a ways off, but search your library for an instant or sorcery card that shares a color with this Planeswalker, exile that card, then shuffle. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So we have a fairly low impact Planeswalker all told here. I kind of like that.
Yeah, mostly Kasmina's you're going to play Kasmina, immediately scry, bump her up to 4 loyalty. If you can protect her next turn, she can make a 3/3, which can further improve your board. The ultimate's pretty bad, but it's still just as a plus. It's just kind of like a plus-minus Planeswalker where you're like, scry, make a token, scry, make a token, and to some degree. This is an extremely mediocre card because sometimes you will play Kasmina and they'll kill your blocker and kill Kasmina and you'll have gotten very little out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can protect Kasmina, she does give you advantage turn over turn, which is kind of what you're looking for. So I would give Kasmina probably a C+. It's a fine card, but it's certainly not an exciting one.
I was going to say B+. My reasoning is because it comes down on 3 and goes to 4. Like, they often just won't have enough power to kill Kasmina, even if they killed your one blocker or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose if you play this on turn 3, it is pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it is tough, though, because let's just say they don't actually kill Kasmina. Well, she's not very good without much loyalty, right? Then you're just, okay, I'll scry one again. Here we go, and that's not great. So I think it's probably somewhere in between. I'll go B- on Kasmina Enigma Sage.
Yeah, B- works for me.
All right, Lorehold Command is 3 red, white for an instant. It's rare. It says choose 2. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. Create creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain indestructible and haste until end of turn. Awkward. 5 mana haste giver. Lorehold Command deals 3 damage to any target. Target player gains 3 life. And sacrifice a permanent, then draw 2 cards. Wow. This is an instant?
So the baseline on this, what you're going to cast most often is a 5 mana 3/2 that deals 3 to any target and you gain 3 life.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I would always play that. And then the fact is you do get other options because sometimes you will want to cast it as like a mass pump, or in rare cases you'll sack a permanent to draw 2. But just the way I look at most of these commands is most of them have like a baseline. Here's what it's going to be like 60% of the time. Mm-hmm. And then everything else above that is good. And Lorehold Command would be an A if it was make a 3/2, deal 3, gain 3.
Yep.
For 5 mana at instant speed. And the fact that you have everything else still means it's basically an A. I don't think it bumps it to an A+, but it's just a fantastic card.
Yeah, one other mode that I think you'll see is make a 3/2 and give everything +1/+0 indestructible and haste. Because that could create a situation where it's kind of that overrun effect where your opponent can't take all the damage, but if they block, they're going to lose most of their board. And you're adding effectively a 4-powered haste indestructible to the board by doing it that way as well. So that could steal games or just, run over your opponent on turn 5 pretty easily too. An A for Lorehold Command. Amazing card.
Yeah.
What about Magma Opus? A clever name there.
I do like the name. It's 6 blue-red for an instant at Mythic Rare. Magma Opus deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. Tap 2 target permanents. Create a 4/4 blue and red elemental token. Draw 2 cards. It also has the ability of paying 2 blue-red hybrid mana and discarding it to make a treasure.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of this because
that's a huge swing. Wow.
When we talk about winning games for 8 mana, well, this is the sort of effect that will win you the game. It's going to nug one of their creatures, tap 2 of their creatures, draw 2, and make a 4/4. And then
on their end step or on their beginning of combat step. Yeah. Right. It's pretty good.
And you can discard it to make a token. And, there's a lot of blue-red support for like accumulating some treasures to cast this, or maybe cheating it out with one of the spell effects, or making it cost less mana. So the fact that you've got some synergies to go with this makes Magma Opus, I think it's probably like an A- because sometimes you're not going to cast it.
I was thinking A-. I was thinking A- as well, especially with that backstop of making a token. Not what you want to do, but that could change a game too.
You got to do what you got to do. So A- on Magma Opus. Card I'm definitely looking forward to trying to get to work.
Dope. Manifestation Sage is next. It's the blue-green for 4 mana, any combination of blue and green. It's a human wizard. It's a 2/2. When it enters a battlefield, you get a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. You put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Nice.
So really easy for this to make like a 3/3. And sometimes it'll make like a 5/5 if you play it like early in the game.
Yeah.
And it's also a 2/2 by itself. So in order for you to get your money back, you kind of need to make a 2/2. And in order for you to feel good, you need to make a 3/3.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty easy to do that. And also, Quandrix kind of pays you off for even just having fractals in play. So this has some additional implied value. I would give Manifestation Sage, I would probably give it an A-. Like, you're just often going to cast this and make like 6/6 worth of stats.
Yeah, I was going to say B+ on it, because there are times like where you're in this deck, you're incentivized to like play your cards out, play all your lands. You're trying to play really expensive stuff, and that does make this worse in the late game. What about Prismari Command?
1 blue-red for an instant rare. Choose 2. deals 2 damage to any target. Target player draws 2 cards, then discards 2 cards. Target player creates a treasure token, destroy target artifact. Not the same effect on the game as Lorehold Command, but 3 mana to shock and then either get a 2-card rummage or make a treasure is pretty good. And then every now and then you are going to blow up an artifact, though. Most of the time, I think this is probably shock plus treasure or shock plus faithless looting.
Mm-hmm. And it's not actually, it's looting, right?
Yeah.
Like
sorry,
not rummaging. Yeah, like it's better. Yeah.
I would be happy to pay 3 mana for this effect. I would give it a B. It's just a good card. Not
really,
a good card.
really good card for 3 mana. Yeah, but like you said, Lorehold Command, is kind of the hammer by comparison. Here's Quandrix Command. This is the 1 green. This one costs 1 green blue. Instant as well. Choose 2. Return target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. So that's nice. You already have a board affecting card there. Counter target artifact or enchantment spell. Okay. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. Nice. And target player shuffles up to 3 target cards from their graveyard to their library. So that's kind of a blank at the end, at least for most limited situations. So bounce a creature, get 2 +1/+1 counters, or counter an enchantment and pump up your guy or bounce their creature. Sure. This feels somewhat on par with Prismari Command, perhaps a little worse.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more situational, but I think when it works, it will be better because when you make it so your 3/3 beats theirs in combat and yours is now a 5/5 permanently, as well as bouncing one of their other creatures, it's going to feel pretty good. So I would give Quandrix Command a B. It's just, the fact that 2 of its modes are kind of whammies is unfortunate, but the 2 good modes are still pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And one of them is more situational, but definitely could be. I mean, it's straight up worth a card if you're like you counter a good artifact from them or whatever. Radiant Scroll Wielder is 2 red-white for a 2/4 dwarf cleric. It is a rare. Instant and sorcery spells you control have lifelink, which we've seen before. Basically, any of them that end up doing damage, you gain that much life. So that's what that does. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard. You may cast it this turn. If a spell cast this way would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Nice.
Fantastic card.
Yeah.
Just basically letting you, I mean, you have to pay the mana, so it's not free, but letting you basically draw one of your spells at random every turn is very good.
Yeah, because you're not going to have that many, right? I mean,
and then every now and then you'll get some bonus off the lifelink, but mostly it's a 2/4 card advantage machine for 4 mana, which I'm pretty happy with. I would give the Scroll Wielder a B+. I don't think Lorehold is going to be, chock full of spells, but it will have enough to make this work.
One thing to keep in mind is that it does exile a card at random, an instant or sorcery at random, regardless of whether you want to or not. So you got to use it or lose it. Like you're really incentivized to cast that spell because it's just going to keep eating through them no matter what. So keep that in mind as you plan your next turns.
It does also trigger all the cards that leave graveyards too. So
right. That's good too. Rushed Rebirth is black-green for an instant. It's rare. It says choose target creature. When that creature dies this turn, search your library for a creature card with lesser mana value, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle.
This is a little too situational for my tastes.
Yeah, not into it.
It's just like you need your creature to die and have there be a good creature to get out of your deck as a result. And it's just not going to do much most of the time. So, like, compare this to one of the cards that, like the one that gives it death touch and brings it back when it dies. Mm-hmm. How much more often would you rather just have that creature instead?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, you can see that there's a little bit of interesting upside here or interesting interaction here with getting something different, but you'd rather just have the same card. Also,
so I would give Rush Rebirth a D, I think.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it an F. I'm not playing that card. This is a pretty badass name. Shadrix Silverquill. Hi, nice to meet you, Shadrix. 3 white black for a 2/5 legendary Elder Dragon at Mythic Rare. And it has flying and double strike. 5 toughness with 2 double strike is nasty. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. So here's your 3 choices. Target player creates a 2/1 black, white and black Inkling creature token with flying. Target player draws a card and loses a life, and target player puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control. Wow. What a cool card. That's really interesting.
The way to exploit this the best is going to be putting +1/+1 counters on all their creatures when they don't have very many in play, or making them draw cards and lose life when you're beating them down.
That's right.
What you're not likely to do is give them the 2/1. I think that's going to be fairly rare.
That's right, and especially because it can actually block the Shadrix here. So,
but I mean, this could attack for 6 if you put a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures. Most likely, you're going to play this, swing for 4, make a 2/1 flyer while giving them either a card or a counter on other creatures, and then next turn give all your creatures +1/+1. Also, you just don't have to use the ability if it's not favorable for you.
Oh, you can choose. You may choose to. Okay.
Yeah, you have to choose 2 if you use the ability. So you have to give them something, but you don't have to use the abilities if it's not in your benefit. So I would give Shadrix an A+.
Me too. This card's absurd.
A behemoth.
Yes, an absolutely absurd card. Shadrix Silverquill. Next is Silverquill Command. This is 2 white-black for a sorcery at rare. Choose 2. Target creature gets +3/+3 and gains flying until end of turn. Return target creature card with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Target player draws a card and loses a life. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. That's powerful stuff.
Being a sorcery means the +3/+3 in flying isn't as much a combat trick as like a lava axe, or you're mostly going to use this to just nug them for a bunch. But this card is pretty strong. What this card is mostly going to hinge on is having a creature to bring back.
Yes.
And that's not going to be that hard because the first mode, the +3/+3 in flying, also rewards having 2 drops. So this is going to be a card that's just going to be a little better in aggro decks. But even then, 4 mana to draw a card, lose a life, and then they sack a creature, that's just a good value card. You can imagine casting that on turn 4 to kill their 3-drop and draw a card and feeling very good about the exchange.
Yeah, totally. And it even gets better from there. It also does get worse, admittedly, but yeah, I like Silverquill Command a lot. I mean, you're going to jam this every single time. B+ for it, I guess.
Yep, I was thinking B+ for Silverquill Command.
Like a semi-solid 2-for-1. Silverquill Silencer is next. It's black, white for a 3/2 human cleric at rare. As it enters the battlefield, choose a non-land card name. And remember, that's as it enters the battlefield, not when it's already there. And whenever an opponent casts a spell with a chosen name, they lose 3 life and you draw a card. That's a sweet card. A little difficult to make work and limited, I would assume.
So mostly it's a 2-mana 3/2.
Yeah.
In a best 2 out of 3 match, you can have some information as to like what's in their deck and what you care about naming. They can pay the iron price if they want. So it's not like it's a meddling mage.
Right.
But I mean,
God,
a 2-mana
that's a tough
3/2
pill to swallow, though.
It is. A 2-mana 3/2 is still pretty good, though.
Yeah.
I would give Silverquill Silencer a C+. It does get better in best 2 out of 3. In best of 1, mostly it's a 2-mana 3/2, which is still a fine card.
Yeah, and you can always name cards that are within the mana cost that you expect to see in the next few turns, and especially ones that can remove it. You might as well name that. Tanazir Quandrix is next. This is a 3 green-blue 4/4 legendary Elder Dragon. So Quandrix Elder Dragon, it's mythic. It has flying and trample. So 4/4 trampler with flying for 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, double the number of +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. And I guess the joke here is it's on a fractal at least. And then whenever Tanzanir Quandrix attacks, you may have the base power and toughness of other creatures you control become equal to Tanzanir Quandrix's power and toughness until end of turn. You can turn everything into 4/4s?
Well, the joke is you make all your fractals 4/4 plus all the number of counters on them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's good anyway, though, right? Like 4/4 is bigger than the average creature, so you're, kind of pumping up the team anyway.
So,
yeah. It's pretty sweet.
In a blue-green deck, this is often going to have like some good stuff going on with both of its abilities, but also it's a 5-mana 4/4 flying trample, which is just a card you put in your deck because it's a good card.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Tanazir is an A- if you're not getting much value out of the abilities just as a big air elemental style creature, but it can easily be an A or even A+ if you've got a lot of creatures with counters and this is at playing the part of a flying virtuous gear hook like that. I mean, that's a pretty big game. So
it is
definitely a strong card, and most Quandrix decks will be well positioned to take advantage of it.
Yeah, we should just settle on A for Tanzanir Quandrix.
Yeah, I agree.
Vanishing Verse is what does it do? What does Vanishing Verse do?
It's white black, so it's 2 mana. It's an instant rare. Exile target monocolored permanent. So can't kill gold cards, can't kill lands, can't kill artifacts. They're not colored. But for 2 mana, you get to exile basically anything outside of that. So any creature, a lot of the other cards in the set. I would just give it Vanishing Verse an A. It's just really efficient. You're going to kill almost anything you need to kill with this.
This is what it takes to get up to the A range. Efficiency plus enough flexibility to make it count. Velomachus Lorehold, the V-Man, 5 red white. So 7 mana for a 5/5 flying vigilance haste Elder Dragon. Wow. Whenever it attacks, look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value less than or equal to Velomachus Lorehold's power from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Damn. And you get to do that right now.
Yep, it has haste. So you spend your 7 mana, you get a 5/5 flying vigilance haste, which I'm already pretty much in for because that does dominate the board fairly nicely.
Yep.
And then you get a peek at 7, and you get to play a 5 mana or less casting cost card.
Dude.
Not hard to figure out, how to make this work, which is put some good spells in your deck and play Velomachus Lorehold and attack. So I would just give this an A as well. The Elder Dragons, are pretty awesome.
Yeah, R&D hasn't lost their touch on how to make Elder Dragons A's. Venerable Warsinger is next. It's 1 red white for a 3/3 Spirit Cleric at rare. It has Vigilance and Trample. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may return target creature card with converted mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of damage Venerable Warsinger dealt to that player. Boosh. That's nice. Works well with combat tricks, too.
Definitely. It's basically got Provoke. They have to block it.
Yeah.
If you've got anything in your graveyard. And then, when you cast a combat trick, it's already got Trample built in, so it'll often trample over and return something. Also, what's funny is if you attacked with this and they blocked with like a 3/3 and you gave it the +3/+1 trick, or if they blocked with a 4/3 rather, this could bring itself back.
No way. Can it really?
If it dies in combat, then the ability goes in the stack. You can just put it right back into play.
Okay, that's amazing.
And it's also back into play, by the way, so you don't even have to spend mana on these creatures.
Yeah.
I like the Warsinger at B+.
I do too.
What's not going to happen very often is you're actually going to bring something back. That's actually not going to happen all that often.
No.
But it's good despite all that because it's a 3 mana 3/3 Vigilance Trample that makes your opponent play in a way they normally wouldn't.
That's right. And if you do get to bring stuff back, you're going to win the game quick. Last gold card is Witherbloom Command. It's black-green for a sorcery. It is rare. It says choose 2. Target player mills 3 cards. Then you return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. You can destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less. You can have target creature get -3/-1 until end of turn, and you can have target opponent lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. This one actually seems quite a bit worse, doesn't it?
This is the weakest of the commands because it gives a creature -3/-1, which is going to ping down a 1 toughness creature or maybe make you win a fight, right? It's pretty good as like a reverse combat trick. But like milling 3 and then drawing a land is not that good. Destroying a 2 or less mana value permanent is not that good because it's non-creature. And draining for 2 isn't that good. This looks like a C.
Yeah.
Look, you should play this card if you're in Witherbloom. It's going to have enough scenarios where you get a card out of it, but it's a C+ actually.
Sure.
You're going to be able to win a combat and then draw a land a lot of the time, and that's okay.
That's fine enough.
This does pale in comparison to the rest of the commands.
Yep. There you go. That we've got a couple of artifacts, literally too. Cody Vociferous Codex. Is this like Clippy? It is like
I think so. This is like a little animated book here.
Yeah, it's 3 mana for a 1/4 legendary artifact creature construct at rare. And it says you can't cast permanent spells. Cody, that's not very good, bud. You can pay 4 mana and tap it to add Wooburg to your mana pool, so 1 of each color of mana. When you cast your next spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery card with lesser mana value. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put each other card exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this just forces you to play all non-permanent spells?
Basically, the idea is like, can you win games without casting permanent spells? Usually, mostly making the some inkling summonings or elemental summonings, right? Like that's kind of the joke here.
Cute, but the answer is not usually. Usually you can't win games without casting permanents in limited. You can sometimes, but
this is a hard mode build around. Realistically, this is an F.
It's just an F, right?
If your goal was to win the game, you should just not put this card in your deck.
Yeah.
That says I have a hard time resisting trying to play this because if you've got lots of spells in your deck, making it so you double up every spell is pretty nice.
Yeah, and it's good for the stream or whatever. But Cody, I'm sorry, you're an F. Next is Strixhaven Stadium. It's 3 mana for an artifact. It's rare. It says tap to add a colorless and put a point counter on Strixhaven Stadium. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, remove a point counter from Strixhaven Stadium. It's like tag. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to an opponent, put a point counter on Strixhaven Stadium. Then if it has 10 or more point counters on it, remove them all. And that player loses the game.
I kind of love this card. It's such good flavor.
That is sweet.
See, good flavor sells like a complicated card.
It really does. This is worth it.
Yeah, and you're sitting there, you're playing Mage Tower or whatever the game is called and trying to win the game. And every turn you get a point counter naturally by tapping this, but every time you hit, you score a point. Every time they hit, you lose a point. And I don't think this card's particularly good because you have to make it so you hit them over the course of 5 turns to get 5 counters while they're not hitting you and you're tapping this every turn to win the game. Mm-hmm. How many games in that scenario do you not win already?
Well, I mean, yeah. So, but hold on a minute. Just to be clear, you can win with this, but you can't lose, right?
You can't lose the game now.
Okay.
And
if you want the ramp, then you just throw it in, right? I mean, why not?
Yeah, for sure. It's a 3-mana colorless ramp card. Also, it does trigger per creature. So a go wide deck with a bunch of pests could kind of steal games with the pest swarm or a bunch of inklings. Mm-hmm. My guess is this is probably like a D, but every now and then it's going to lead to some pretty sweet games. And if you do need the ramp, it can actually I bet the psychological effect of having this in play with like 4 counters on it is really going to make it so your opponent makes some ill-advised attacks.
Totally, and it probably does change combat. I'm going to give it a C for Strixhaven Stadium. Sure, I mean, you're kind of getting free-rolled a fun game, right?
The game is on.
The game's on. Next is the Biblioplex. This is a land that taps for colorless. It's rare. You can pay 2 mana and tap it to look at the top card of your library. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you may reveal it and put it into your hand. If you don't put the card into your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. And you can activate this only if you have exactly 0 or 7 cards in hand.
Basically, this has the 7-card part to make it flavorfully connected to the Library of Alexandria. Mm-hmm. Because you're never activating this with 7. If you have 7 cards in your hand, you can do way better than this.
You can do better.
This is just not going to do anything.
Right.
So as a land that has value when you have 0 cards in hand, I think the Biblioplex is going to be worth a slot in decks that have decent mana.
Okay.
Because one thing to note is that it's Surveil 1 even if you have no instant or sorceries in your entire deck.
Right. That's strong. I mean, that's really... And then if you're just like randomly picking up instants and sorceries into your hand for this, that matters. It can be difficult to get down to 0, though.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing a bunch of instants and sorceries that like draw you cards or something. But I'm with you. I would give it like a C. Like I'd want to build around it a little bit. Like I wouldn't want to run in a deck that just had nothing else going. But the fact that it does things regardless once you get to that point is kind of powerful. I like it. I'd give it a C for Biblio.
I would give Biblioplex a C. I don't think you're going to go out of your way, but you will play it some amount of the time.
Okay, we've got basically 2 lands left. There's a cycle of 5, 1 for each college. And these are all rare lands that when they enter the battlefield, you may reveal, like in the case of Frostboil Snarl, which is the Prismari version, the red-blue, you can reveal an island or mountain from your hand. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. And it taps for blue or red. And so there's one of these for each of the colleges.
They're just perfectly playable if you're those 2 colors.
Straight duels. Yep.
They're just C's. They're not like super exciting, but they're obviously fine.
And then there's Hall of Oracles, which is a land, again, at rare that taps for colorless, and you can pay 1 mana and tap it to add 1 mana of any color, so it filters. But remember, that isn't great. And then you can tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, but you can only activate as a sorcery, and only if you've cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn. Hey,
I don't mind the Hall of Oracles.
It's kind of cool.
Like, sometimes you'll pay the tax to fix your mana a little bit. Like, I have played Shimmering Grotto before. It's not good, but it is something you could do. And then basically Magecraft, getting to tap this to put a +1/+1 counter on anything, like that is going to work out pretty nicely.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually like Hall of Oracles. I mean, these are steep costs to pay. Like, I don't put lands in my deck that tap for colorless lightly, but this could definitely be a thing. And, the filtration when you're getting it is like not really why you'd put it in your deck, but sometimes it comes up where you can actually use it. I would give it a C as well. The colorless is pretty tough still for me.
I think I like it as a C+, just because I think that the fact that you have the buyout of fixing mana for an extra mana means it's not just a colorless land. It's only a colorless land when you also don't have an extra mana lying around, which
True.
Does negate some of the fail cases.
It really does. Yeah, no, you're right. All right, C+ for Hall of Oracles. Okay, so Luis, that's it for the bulk of the main cards, but there are these special cards that we're going to go over now, and this is the Mystical Archive. So there's 18 common, 30 rare, 50 Mythic Rare Mystical Archive cards that are reprints from other times, basically, other sets, other times. So let's get into them because there's some spicy ones and there's some really not that spicy ones. First up is, go ahead.
Of note, you get 1 per pack, and it is based on the how often you see each of the Mystical Archive cards is based on rarity. So I actually did a bunch of pick 1 pack ones for the release party. Just like I filled these out, and in cracking all these packs, you open a lot of ops and negates and duresses and whatnot. So
good to know.
The rarity definitely matters.
Okay, so we'll keep that in mind, and I'll call out the rarities here too. So the first one out is Approach of the Second Sun. This is and by the way, visually, these are stunning. There's 2 different versions of them. There's a Japanese one, I think the Japanese versions are like the most visually stunning Magic cards I've ever seen. Like, they are just absolutely jump off the page. But the English version ones too are absolutely crazy looking. They're really cool. I'm curious to see what they look like in real life. Anyway, Approach of the Second Sun, 6 and a white sorcery, Mythic Rare. If this spell was cast from your hand and you've cast another spell named Approach of the Second Sun this game, you win the game. Otherwise, put Approach of the Second Sun into its owner's library, 7th from the top, and you gain 7 life. This is an interesting alternate win condition that is actually pretty bulletproof against a lot of types of limited decks that don't interact with your hand or your spells on the stack, where if you can get yourself to a stable board state, it can be like a pretty rock solid win condition. I don't know how it'll do in this set, given that it's white and that the white guilds might not lend themselves to it. Perhaps white-black does, but red-white probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I would give this probably a build around B, where if you can build a good control deck, Approach of the Second Sun is pretty strong. But it's also like not a card you can just put into every deck and expect to succeed with it.
That's right. Next up is Day of Judgment. Now there's a card, 2 white sorcery. This one's Mythic Rare. Destroy all creatures. So just a classic Wrath here. And that's some business in limited for sure. Yeah,
I like Day of Judgment at A. It's just not hard to set up a 4-mana Wrath in the way you want. Plus, at 4 mana, you can sometimes cast a 3-drop on turn 7 and be the first back on the board.
Yeah, that can happen too. So A for Day of Judgment. It's going to come out of nowhere too because it's mythic and not in the bulk set. Next is Defiant Strike. It's white for an instant. It's uncommon here. And it says target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and you draw a card. This is kind of a throwaway, right? It's like whatever. But I got to say that we've talked a lot about Magecraft, and I was saying before that I wanted a 1-mana cantrip, and this one's an instant even.
Yeah,
I think you're going to play it.
It's going to be a solid card. I would give Defiant Strike a C+. You're not really risking much, and when it's good, it can be really good.
Right, that's what I think too. C+ for Defiant Strike. Next is Divine Gambit. That was just from last set. It's white sorcery. This one, it's an uncommon. You exile an artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls. That player may put a permanent card from their hand onto the battlefield.
Yeah, we just played with this in Kaldheim, and
some of us did.
Yeah, against low curve decks, it can be decent, and it can be decent when both players have like very few cards in hand. Mm-hmm. So I think that there is something to be said for the Divine Gambit, though of course it can be a bit of a risk.
I give it a D. That's what I had it before, and that's what I'd have it starting out with here.
I thought Divine Gambit was a little better than that. I thought it was like a C+ card.
I know you thought that, but yeah, it just wasn't true, so it's kind of hard. Ephemerate is white for an instant. This one's rare. Exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. And it has rebound, where if you cast a spell from your hand, you exile it as it resolves, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to cast it again without paying its cost for free, and then you exile it.
So this is pretty sweet with enter the battlefield effects.
You don't exile it; it just gets cast again. Go ahead.
Yeah. Because you basically get double triggers off of it. You get to ephemerate your creature, and the next turn ephemerate your creature again. Mm-hmm. If you don't have enters the battlefield effect, this card doesn't do that much. Like, yes, It saves a creature, but then you cast it on upkeep, and it doesn't really accomplish anything. So it's kind of like a build around B, where if you have like 3 or 4 creatures with good ETBs, I would definitely play this, but I would probably not play it otherwise.
No, there's other things you can do too, but they're risky. Like you can blink a creature that's tapped and then it'll come back in untapped and then block with it. But you're really opening up the door for some nonsense if you do that. Yeah. Gift of Estates is 1 and a white for a sorcery. It's rare. It says if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for up to 3 plains cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle. I don't even know this card.
Yeah, this is like I think a portal card or something.
Oh, it's from Portal. Okay.
So
this is a mana or what was it called?
When you need this to do something, it usually does something because you're shorter on lands, and if you're on the draw, you can easily just play your second land, cast this on turn 3 before playing your third land.
Right.
But there will be some times when you're both on 4 lands and this is in your hand. You're like, wow, this really doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. Also, 2 mana to draw 3 lands is good, but it doesn't ramp you. My guess is it's still pretty good. I would give Gift of Estates a B. I think that most of the time that you're going to be pretty happy having this card in your deck.
Yeah, and it allows you to do rummaging and other things more effectively.
Exactly, yeah.
Next is God's Willing. This is white for an instant at rare. It says target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice until end of turn, and you scry 1. This card was an absolute overperformer in its in Theros where it was originally printed. It's really good. It's super strong.
I would give it a B+. It's just a really, really efficient card.
Yeah, B+ for God's Willing, which is I mean, you have to recognize what we're giving, but for 1 white mana, it's pretty great. Mana Tithe. Oh, good, clean fun here. White mana for an instant at rare. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. How much do we like Mana Tithe in regular limited?
Oh, I think it's good. If it's in your opening hand, you're almost always be able to snag something. Mm-hmm.
And if it's not,
lessons make it so that you don't play out excess lands because you have them to discard to your lessons. It can really punish expensive cards, which both Quandrix and Prismari are looking to play 6, 7, 8 mana cards. Mm-hmm. I think Mana Tithe's a C+. I would always put this card in my deck.
The lessons thing you bring up also. I'm assuming that people are also going to be interested in going cast a thing that has learn, go get a lesson, cast a lesson. So that means your Mana Tithe's more likely. What grade did you give it?
I like C+ on Mana Tithe.
Okay, C+ on Mana Tithe. Revitalize is back. It's 1 and a white for an instant. It's uncommon here. You gain 3 life and draw a card. Yeah, if this was black or green, I think I might be pretty interested in it. But in white, I don't think I am.
Also, it's good for Magecraft, but again, this is the kind of card that just rarely finds a home. So it's a C in that you're never going to hurt your win percentage by putting this card in your deck, but you're also almost always going to have better cards to put in your deck instead.
Right, and that's the classic, you could have it in your deck, but it just always gets bumped. So, Luis, this is a special moment for the podcast. We get to give a grade to the best removal spell ever printed. This is just the literal best removal. It's Swords to Plowshares. White mana instant. It's rare here. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. This is the GOAT. This is the number 1.
Yeah, I mean,
give it an
Swords
A.
gets an A.
Yep.
Like, it's 1 mana to exile any creature. Yes, they might gain some life, but like, who cares?
Who cares?
So, yes, Swords is ridiculous. It is a rare, luckily. So I guess Mystical Archive cards also, they come in common, uncommon, rare, and mythic. There's no commons, but you open a lot of the uncommons.
That's right. And this one's a rare. But yeah, yay! Source of Plowshares gets an A. Teferi's Protection is our next one. It's 2 and a white for an instant. This one's mythic. It says until your next turn, your life total can't change, and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out, and then you exile this card. I'm just going to say no on this, right? This just buys you a turn, but
it's an F. It's just it's a super fog, but it's still a fog. It's not. It doesn't really accomplish anything.
How about Blue Sun Zenith? This is blue X for an instant. It's mythic here. Target player draws X cards, and then you shuffle Blue Sun Zenith into its owner's library. So 5 mana, draw 2, 6 mana, draw 3. We already have one of these in the set. there's 2 now.
Well, so this I think has a couple things that make it quite a bit better. One is that it shuffles back in, so you can use it early, and then later you'll draw it when you really want it again. The other is it's target player, so you can actually use this as a pretty effective win condition. The play pattern with the Zenith is like cast Zenith, draw 3 cards, stabilize the board because I drew extra cards, and then later cast Zenith for 7 on your opponent to deck them.
That happens a lot too. Obviously, you have to be heavy into blue to make it work. But Blue Sun Zenith is a good card in limited, especially in a controlling deck. Like Prismari is going to be all over this thing.
Yeah, I think even Quandrix will be too if they have a bunch of ramp cards.
For sure. So
I would give it a B.
B, okay. B for Blue Sun Zenith. Another iconic card, though not nearly as powerful for us as Swords of Plowshares, is Brainstorm. Blue instant, it's rare here. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 of the cards from your hand on top of your library in any order.
Yeah, this is one of the cards that has the biggest delta between being good in constructed and being good in limited. I think Brainstorm is a C in that you're not really hurting yourself, again, by putting this card in your deck, because it's 1 blue to basically cycle. You get to, and even get access to cards a little earlier, though you then have to redraw some stuff. If you are somehow in a deck that has a bunch of shuffle or exile from the top type of effects, you can take advantage of this. But most of the time, this is just a straight up, this is a 1 mana cantrip if that's what you're in for.
Yep. So, I'm thinking in terms of Magecraft. Sure. I mean, you'd play as many Brainstorms as you could get. So C for Brainstorm. Compulsive Research is here. This is a nice one. 2 and a blue for a sorcery. It's rare here. Target player draws 3 cards. Then that player discards 2 cards unless they discard a land card.
Actually, like a B+ on Compulsive Research.
Ooh.
It's a very strong card draw spell. You almost always have a land to discard, so it's a kind of like a 3 mana draw 3 discard 1, and that puts you up a significant amount of cards. This card was just a bomb in Ravnica. It was one of the best commons, and I think the same would be true here.
Yeah, I think so too. When you play this on 3, you're going to be like, oh right, this is absurd. Next, another classic. It's Counter Spell. Blue instant counter target spell. The OG.
Yeah, still not spectacular here because at blue, you're still paying a pretty big cost, which is double blue and also leaving mana up. But 2 is a lot better than 3. So I would give this a C+, whereas most 3 mana counters I like around C-.
Yeah, this is better than that, but still in the same ballpark. Memory Lapse is next. It's 1 and a blue for an instant, and it says counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it on top of its owner's library instead of into that player's graveyard.
So I actually like this more than Counterspell because the fact that it costs 1 and a blue instead of double blue just means that you can use this so much more often.
Yeah.
You don't really have to draw double blue. So I like Memory Lapse at B- because you're spending 2 mana to waste their turn, and you're even on cards because they're putting a card back on top. Yeah, you're not countering forever their card, but this card can actually buy you quite a bit of time. So I like B- on Memory Lapse.
Okay, yeah, much easier to cast. Mind's Desire. I don't think you'll probably cast this, but it's 4 blue for a sorcery. It's mythic here. Shuffle your library, then exile the top card of your library until end of turn you can play that card without paying its mana cost. Okay, 6 mana, but I only get 1 card? No, it has Storm. So when you cast a spell, you copy it for each spell cast before it this turn.
This is an F.
It's just an F.
You can't make this work in limited.
This is a sweet looking negate, but it's still just a negate. It's 1 and a blue, instant counter target non-creature spell. It's uncommon here.
Sideboard C. It's a fine sideboard card.
Here's a slightly better than Brainstorm, I would say. It's Opt. It's blue, instant, uncommon, scry 1, and then draw a card. This actually lets you, get rid of cards from the top of your library that you don't need.
Yeah, I like to Opt at C+. It's just a fine little cantrip.
Yeah, and again, these are the types of things that can trigger the Magecraft stuff really easily. Strategic planning, okay, not as good as Opt, but you're probably going to do it. 1 and a blue, sorcery, uncommon. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them in your hand and the rest in your graveyard. I'd think that Prismari would be pretty into a strategic planning.
I think it's going to be fine. I think it'll be a C-level common because you're not getting that much value about having cards in your graveyard.
Yeah, I mean, some of the cards care about that, right? Like the red cards that exile them and let you cast them for free and stuff. But I agree. I mean, none of these are high priority.
No.
Tezzeret's Gambit is 3 and a Phyrexian blue, which means you can pay blue or 2 life to cast it. And it's a sorcery. At rare, it says draw 2 cards, then proliferate. Proliferate says choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind they already have.
I actually like this one quite a bit because Phyrexian mana is colorless. You have to pay 2 life instead of paying the Phyrexian mana, which means you can put this in any color of deck.
That's right.
And there is the black-white theme of +1/+1 counters, which this works pretty nicely with.
Right. So that's actually pretty cool. Would you go C+ or B- for Tezzeret's Gambit?
I think B- because it's so free to take early. You can end up in any colors, and then if you can ever proliferate, it's going to be pretty sweet.
Yeah, like imagine this in Lorehold. Like I think it's actually pretty good. Like reload and get some counters. Time Warp. Oh man, they got some sweet stuff in here. 3 blue sorcery. Target player takes an extra turn after this one. This one is Mythic here.
So
Time Warp's sweet.
It's definitely playable. It's not as good as you might think, again, because most of the constructed decks that feature it, this card's like kind of the centerpiece. Whereas in limited, most of the time, this is like 5 mana to untap all my lands, draw a card, maybe make an extra land up, and maybe hit them for a little bit of damage, but not even that all the time.
Yep.
So,
and when you're behind, it's just basically draw an extra card.
Yeah, I would say it's a C+ because the upside is there, but the downside is too, when you have this in your hand and you don't have 5 mana, then you draw your 5th land. It's not like the Time Warp does anything.
Right. So there you go. C+ for Time Warp. Whirlwind Denial is 2 and a blue for an instant uncommon. For each spell and ability your opponents control, counter it unless its controller pays 4.
This is effectively a bad 3 mana counter because at some point it even goes dead. And yes, it can counter multiple things if they play some sort of spell that it puts multiple things on the stack. But for the most part, this is like a sideboard D where I would only put this in against like a deck that's playing really expensive cards.
Right. Agonizing Remorse is 1 and a black for a sorcery at uncommon. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it or a card from their graveyard. Exile that card and you lose a life. These usually do well in limited. Yeah.
Yeah. 2 mana is a pretty good deal on this. So I would give it a C+. It's a good disruptive card.
Yeah, I agree. Here's a house. Crux of Fate. 3 black, sorcery. Mythic Rare. Choose one. Destroy all dragon creatures, which actually might be relevant here. And then there's also destroy all non-dragon creatures, which is the more commonly chosen mode. But I could see both modes being relevant here.
Yeah, it's got sweet art too.
Yeah, sure.
This is mostly just a Wrath for 5 mana, but like you said, if they have an Elder Dragon or you do, you can like do a little fuzzing here and there where you're like, ooh, you know, kill all your stuff, but leave my dragon alive, or just kill your dragon.
Right.
So
Crux of Fate performs pretty well though.
Yeah, I would give it an A-. 5 mana is a lot worse than 4 when it comes to a Wrath because you can sneak in a Day of Judgment without looking suspicious of like, oh, you didn't have a 2 or a 3 drop.
Right.
You didn't have a 2, 3, or 4 drop. At this point, your opponent's like, well, I don't know if I'm buying all that. So I would give Crux of Fate an A-.
Yeah, I was going to say B+. It's right in that range. Next one, Dark Ritual. Black mana for an instant. It's rare. It says add 3 black mana to your mana pool. I'm not going to be playing Dark Ritual, Luis.
So I gave this card a 0 in my written set review.
That's
and
correct.
Got so mad.
Oh, no, they did?
Well, Dark Ritual's busted. Everyone knows that. It's basically
right.
Black Lotus off a swamp.
I always forget.
And you can cast all these great cards. No, it's not good. You should not play Dark Ritual. So I did think of an interesting scenario where Dark Ritual could be good.
Oh, did you?
It's with a Mascot Exhibition, the 7-mana lesson card, where you have, and it makes, the 4/4, 3/2, and a 2/1. If you have Mascot Exhibition in your sideboard and you have a bunch of learn cards, you have very reliable access to a good 7-mana spell. At that point, might Dark Ritual be playable?
Man, how do you think of this stuff? Like, this is why you're the best co-host in the game, man. That is just
it's really true.
I still wouldn't play it myself, but that does make me more likely to. Like, basically, like if you take that to the extreme and say you have a 7-mana bomb, right? You always have access to a 7-mana bomb. Oh, I am more likely to play Dark Ritual. What you told me was I have a really good card, maybe not a full-on bomb, but a really good card most of the time. And that does get me closer. I mean, you've moved the needle, but I just hate the fail cases on Dark Ritual. And also, you are still giving up a card. Like, a lot of the decks that can cast those can just afford to wait a couple of extra turns and then have an extra spell in their hand.
Well, giving up a card to hit with your 4/4 and 3/2 a turn earlier or 2 turns earlier isn't too bad. But I also have to give credit because it was BK who thought of that whole scheme.
Yeah, it was.
But yes, I would give Dark Ritual an F. I do not think you should play it.
It is an F. Don't play it.
And before thinking about how wrong we are and how busted Dark Ritual is, just think about the scenarios where you don't draw this and exactly the right mana cost of something to accelerate out, or you do and they killed the creature you play or whatever. There's a lot. The games where Dark Ritual is better than Swamp are just not that often.
No. Adding an extra card to the cost of a card is really taxing. Demonic Tutor. Here's an interesting discussion. So this is 1 and a black sorcery. Search your library for a card, put it in your hand, then shuffle. It's mythic. Now, we usually hate these types of cards, but they also cost more frequently 4 mana, sometimes 5 mana these days. When you get down into the 2 mana range, you've actually got my interest here. For any card in my deck, I'm willing to pay a 2 mana tax, especially if I have cheap interactive cards that I could conceivably get and cast in the same turn with Tutor.
Yeah, I actually do like Demonic Tutor quite a bit for that same reason. Mm-hmm. I would give Demonic Tutor a B, and if you have a bomb, it moves up to like an A because it's pretty close to a second copy of your bomb. Yeah,
and the cheaper the things that you're getting, the better it is for Tutor, so keep that in mind. Cool that it's around, too.
Definitely.
Another classic here, Doomblade, baby. 1 and a black for an instant. It's rare here, destroy target non-black creature. So, we got Swords to Plowshares and Doomblade in this set, technically speaking. I mean, these are 2 of the best removal spells we've had for limited.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because Doomblade used to be a common and all that, but I would give this an A-. It's just that efficient.
I would too. It's just pure efficiency. Duress is here. This is black sorcery. Uncommon. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-creature, non-land card from it. They discard it.
This is a sideboard card.
Yeah, good against Prismari.
You'll miss a little too often. I think if we play out the format and it turns out that every deck has all these like lesson and learn cards and tons of spells, maybe you could main deck Duress. But again, kind of going back to the Dark Ritual discussion, when you cast this and miss, it's really bad for you.
It's really bad.
And when you hit, it's still a 1-for-1, and you spent 1 mana, they spent 0, so it's not like you ran away with the game. So I would give Duress a sideboard C.
Yeah, same. It's a medium. It's a fine sideboard card. Eliminate one black instant, is uncommon. Destroy target creature or planeswalker with mana value 3 or less. Kills small stuff. This is a B plus.
Yeah, good. It kills enough stuff. 3 is a good threshold.
It does. Yep. So B plus for eliminate. Inquisition of Kozilek is in here. Man, they did not hold back. Black sorcery at rare here. Target player reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it with mana value 3 or less, and that player discards that card.
I like this more than Duress because most of the time you are going to hit on this, but it does run some of the same risks. I would main deck this card. I think it's a C. I don't think it's like a really spectacular card, but it's worth main decking.
Agreed. Yeah, you can't take like Elder Dragons with it and stuff like that. That's the tough part is that there's bombs that it misses, but it's still worth running. I agree. C for Inquisition. Sign in Blood, black for a sorcery at rare. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life.
The double black mana cost is the biggest thing holding this back, but it's still pretty strong if you can cast it, and it's a finisher every now and then too.
It is.
I would give Sign in Blood a C+. I've always been happy playing this card.
I would too.
It's shown up in a lot of sets.
Right. It's just rarely a turn 2 play. It's more like a turn 5 play where you play it, get your 2 cards, play something else. That can happen pretty often. Tainted Pact is next. It's 1 and a black for an instant. It's Mythic Rare. It says exile the top card of your library. You may put that card into your hand unless it has the same name as another card exiled this way. Repeat this process until you put a card into your hand or you exile 2 cards with the same name, whichever comes first. And yes, that does count basic lands.
Yeah. The fact that you're just going to have 8 swamps in your deck makes this card pretty bad. Because what'll happen is, for most non-land cards, you're only going to have 1 copy of. But as soon as you hit one of your basics,
you just have to take it.
You either have to take it, or you just know you're running into like a solid 20 to 30% chance that you're just going to miss or whatever.
Right, and that's just unacceptable. I don't think I would put Tainted Pact in my limited deck.
No, I would advise against it as well.
I just wouldn't do it.
I think you should it would get an F.
It's just an F.
Speaking of Fs, Tendrils of Agony is 2 black sorcery. Target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, and it has Storm. But again, you really can't realistically make this into the drain 6 that it needs to be. So I would give Tendrils an F as well.
Mm-hmm. Same. Village Rites is black instant. It's uncommon. As an additional cost to cast it, you sacrifice a creature and you draw 2 cards.
Yeah,
it's fringe playable.
In Witherbloom, I think this card would be fine.
Definitely.
It's going to play out all right. So I would give Village Rites a C in the deck that can use it. So it's kind of like a build around C.
Yeah, CC plus for Witherbloom. I mean, sacking a pest to it's great. That moves us to red. Chaos Warp is 2 and a red for an instant. It's mythic. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it on the battlefield. Can we play this in limited?
I don't think you should, because most limited decks are going to have a lot of permanents in them. And if you hit a permanent with this, you just gave them a free card, plus you cast it if it's an expensive one.
Yeah. Oh, the disaster case is really bad for Chaos Warp. So I think, we're just not running it. I'd probably give it a D or something.
I think a D is right. I think that there's a chance that you play against a deck that clearly has like 10 spells in it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, okay, so they have 13 creatures and 10 spells. So it's like a 1 out of 3 to get something back. Not counting lands is like kind of a whammy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not so bad. But most decks, I think, is just going to be too much of a risk.
Yeah. Claim the Firstborn. That's red sorcery. Gain control of target creature with mana value 3 or less until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn, and that's an uncommon.
There's just not a sack deck here. So I would give Claim an F.
Faithless Looting is here. It's red for a sorcery. It's rare. Draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards, and it has flashback for 2 and a red. I'm curious to see if there's a deck that can take advantage of this, but my baseline stance on Faithless Looting is that I don't put it in my deck unless I have a reason to get stuff in the yard or specific cards I'm digging for.
I agree. I think Faithless Looting is a D. It's just not a particularly playable card. Like, yes, it can get you 2 Make Trap triggers and can put stuff in your graveyard, but you are down a card when you cast this.
That's the problem. Giving
a flashback doesn't make you not down a card.
Right.
You're still down a card overall.
Right, and that's the problem, is that you need to be able to find things that can change that. Grape Shot. Wow, they really went off with Storm. 1 and a red sorcery. This one's rare. Grape Shot deals 1 damage to any target, and it has Storm. I know some people have played this in limited when it's been around, just as like a do 2 or maybe 3 damage every once in a while. Is that realistic?
Yeah, this can pretty easily deal 2. You can make it into Forked Bolt without too much trouble, and then sometimes you make it into a deal 3. And the fact that you can always split it up the max amount, I would basically always play Grape Shot because it's just not hard to make it into a deal 2. Yes, you should be aware of your curve, but I don't think it will be too difficult to utilize this card, especially if you have like cheap lessons and learn cards. So I would give Grape Shot a C. I'm not saying it's a good card, but it's definitely a playable one.
Okay. Increasing Vengeance is red for an instant at Mythic. It says copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. If that spell was cast from a graveyard, copy that spell twice instead. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, copy that spell twice instead. You may choose new targets for the copy. And as you might have guessed, it has flashback. The cost is 3 red. You can cast it from your graveyard.
I kind of like Increasing Vengeance, actually. I think that there's going to be enough support to make copying spells like decent. It triggers Magecraft twice.
Yeah.
Like once on casting this, once on the copy. And then now you have this card, which is expensive to flash back, but if you get up to 8 mana and copy this on like the 3 mana deal 4, all of a sudden you're really talking, right? You're getting 3 copies. So I would actually give this a build around B. I think this card is really good in the heavy spell decks.
In spell decks, it also has flashback, so it leaves the graveyard, etc. Kind of cool. Infuriate, red, instant, uncommon, target creature gets +3/+2 until end of turn.
Yeah, not much special going on here. If you want a combat trick, it's fine, but you probably don't most of the time. So I would give it a C.
I would give it a D+ or a C-. It's just a super run-of-the-mill combat trick, although it is a fine combat trick for red. I should say that. Lightning Bolt. Holy crap. Red mana instant. Rare. Lightning Bolt deals 3 damage to any target.
Woo. I would give this an A. I mean, this
is amazing. Super efficient.
Also, there's a common, copy the next spell you play card, right? For 2 mana. Like stuff like Lightning Bolt really makes you pop off there. But yeah, Lightning Bolt gets an A. Yeah.
Man, we have Lightning Bolt, Source of Plowshares, and Doomblade in the same set. Mythic's Mastery, 3 and a red for a sorcery. It's mythic. It says, exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it. And you may cast a copy without paying its mana cost, and then exile Mythic's Mastery. You can also overload it for 5 red, which means that you cast a spell for all of those instead of just one.
I think this card's awesome. If I saw this early, I would just go after all the discard a card to make a treasure cards I could, because we're talking like turn 3 make 2 4/4s or something like that.
Oh, because you could pay one of the 7 or the Magma Opus or whatever on turn 4.
You discard them to make a treasure, then you just cast Mythic's Mastery.
On turn 3?
Yeah.
Okay, that's super dope.
Okay. And then, I mean, it also costs 8, but at 8, you play all the spells out of your graveyard, which is definitely something. So I would actually give this a build around A.
That's amazing.
If you have, let's say you had 3 of the cards, 2 of the commons and 1 of the uncommon, like Creative Expression and 2 of the elemental summoning things, and then discard in your deck, it's going to be really good. You're routinely going to play a 7-mana spell pretty early.
Pretty early. Turn 3 is insane. Okay, I'm into it. Shock is here. This is a little embarrassing having it this close to Lightning Bolt on the sheet, but anyway, it's Lightning Bolt, but it does 2 damage instead of 3. It's still pretty good.
I think at this, I would probably give Shock a B. I think just given the spell nature of this set, this card gets a little bit of a bump, and it's just a fine card.
Yeah, I agree, and it's cheap too, so we'll still give it B. Stone Rain, 2 and a red. For the opponents you really hate. Sorcery, destroy target land.
Look, this is an F. Don't put this card in your deck. It's not going to work. I don't want to crush any dreams here, but it's not an effective plan to Stone Rain them. So just don't try to do it.
By the way, they're the one who's trying to crush dreams here versus Stone Rain. Thrill of Possibility, 1 and a red. For an instant, it's uncommon. As an additional cost to cast it, you discard a card and you draw 2 cards. Yeah, see, these are cards that are super mediocre, but I still feel like they actually kind of fit with all the Magecraft and the Prismari and that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, I would give Thrill of Possibility a C. I think you're going to play it and be okay.
Urza's Rage, 2 and a red for an instant. This spell can't be countered. Urza's Rage deals 3 damage to any target, but it has a kicker cost of 8 and a red. So 9 extra mana. If this spell was kicked, it does 10 damage to that permanent or player instead, and the damage can't be prevented.
I mean, this is a B, or probably a B plus, mostly as 3 mana deal 3. The 12 mana part is not really going to happen very often, but still, 3 mana deal 3 at instant speed, especially it can't even be countered, is pretty good. So I like B plus on Urza's Rage.
Here's green, Abundant Harvest, green mana for a sorcery at rare. Choose land or non-land. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen kind. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
I like this card. It's a cycling card, but it always cycles you to what you're looking for, which is action or lands. So you could play 1 less land and just put this card in your deck, and it wouldn't really work out too poorly for you.
Right.
So it never misses, So I would give it a C plus. I don't think it's a high priority card, but it's going to be good.
Yeah, C plus for Abundant Harvest. That's cool. Adventurous Impulse, similar, a little worse perhaps. It's green for a sorcery uncommon. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, and you may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it in your hand and put the rest in any order. You can't really miss with this in most green decks either, but you don't necessarily know what you're going to get.
Yeah, I would say this card is a C. It's fine to play it if this is the effect you want. You just have to make sure you have a high enough creature count that you're not going to miss too often.
What do you think about Channel Urza's Rage combo?
So Channel's green for a sorcery at Mythic Rare. Until end of turn, you may pay 1 life to add a colorless mana to your mana pool.
Not doing it. not in this set.
No, this is an F. There's just not enough ways to make this work. Though, if you do get the red XXX card, it is only 12 life to kill them. So,
and double and red and a bunch of green. Yeah, no. Cultivate. Here's a nice one. 2 and a green sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal them. Put one of them onto the battlefield tapped and one in your hand, and then shuffle.
Cultivate's really good.
Yeah.
It's a 2-for-1 that also ramps you and fixes your colors. Cultivate gets a B+ for me. I'm really happy playing this card.
Yeah, I'd give Cultivate a B. Quandrix is just an absolute love with Cultivate. Harmonize is 2 GG for a sorcery. It's rare. Draw 3 cards. Yeah,
I like Harmonize a B+ as well. I think this is just a really solid draw card.
Yeah, I would say B as well. A little bit less, but right in the same realm. Croson Grip, 2 and a green instant. It has split second, which means if it's on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. And what it does is it destroys an artifact or enchantment. It's rare.
I mean, split second is cool. It's gonna you always feel very secure when you have it. This is still just a straight up sideboard card.
Yeah.
So sideboard C. It's just a fine card.
This is just an excellent naturalize. Natural Order is next. 2 green. For a sorcery, it's mythic as an additional cost to cast it. Sacrifice a green creature, and you search your library for a green creature card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle.
Pests are green, by the way.
Bookworm, maybe? Pests are green? Ooh. Go get my bookworm?
This is like a build around D. Like, yes, if you had a bookworm and a bunch of ways to make pests, I could see it. But for the most part, this is kind of like Dark Ritual. You're going to spend 4 mana, you're going to sack a creature, and you're going to get a creature that costs like 6 mana. Yeah. And that's just not good enough. So
yeah.
If you can pull this off, it could be sweet, but most of the time I think Natural Order is unplayable.
Yeah, if you had, say, the Quandrix Dragon or something like, a couple like that and a Bookworm, like 2 just premium targets maybe. But yeah, I agree with Luis. You don't normally want to be doing it. Primal Command, 3 green for a sorcery. Choose 2. This is mythic, by the way. Target player gains 7 life. Put target non-creature permanent on top of its owner's library. Target player shuffles their graveyard into their library and search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle.
Primal Command's fantastic.
Yeah, most of the time people put a non-creature permanent on top and then go get a creature of their own because that's kind of the 2-for-1.
Yeah, you get to put a land on top of their deck, so it sets them back a turn, and then you go get whatever your best creature is. But also gaining 7 life can be really good.
Yep.
And then in the super late game, shuffling your graveyard back, like that can work. Plus, if they have a non-creature permanent that's really causing you problems, you can put it on top and make them shuffle.
Yep.
So
shuffle it
there's
away.
That too.
Yeah.
But Primal Command, it gets an A from me. I think it's just too flexible.
It's awesome. Yeah, when you get to play it and go get your best creature and bounce some stuff, it's fantastic. Regrowth, 1 and a green sorcery. Return target creature, target card anytime you want from your graveyard to your hand. Is this good and limited? This is like, again, where we're getting cheap enough to actually consider these things kind of, in the same vein of Demonic Tutor.
Yeah, it's not as good as Demonic Tutor, but I think it's like a C+. Like, you're always going to be able to get back the card you want, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And for the price, you might be able to cast that card the same turn. Snakeskin Veil, green instant, uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn.
This has played out just fine. It's not, it's not amazing, but it's definitely playable. So I would give it a C.
Yeah.
It's just an okay card.
C for the mediocre combat trick. Weather the Storm, 1 and a green instant. You gain 3 life. Storm. No.
So no, the only thing I would think of is it's cheap enough that if you have a deck that's really heavy on Magecraft, this is a way to put like 2 or 3 spells on the stack. Like you go spell, Weather the Storm, it triggers, you get 3 spells off it. So sure, but yes, it's probably just an F, but I could just see like some sideways combos with Magecraft.
Yeah, just because it's a cheap Storm card, but I would start with that.
And it gains life for the life gain theme, but yeah.
It does. D-Spark is white-black for an instant. It's rare. It says exile target permanent with mana value 4 or greater. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in for this. This is going to hit almost everything you care about hitting. So I would say D-Spark's probably an A-. It's just going to be too wide a range.
Yep. Every deck plays stuff that costs 4 or greater, even the super cheap stuff. Man, this is one of my favorites, Luis. Electrolyze. 1 blue-red for an instant. It does 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 targets, and you draw a card. It's so sweet. Instant speed. Oh my God. I'm a
Yeah,
big fan.
Electrolyze is great.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm at A- for Electrolyze too.
Yeah.
You're just always getting such good value out of this card.
Yeah, and if you're surprised that we're giving it an A-, wait till you play it. You'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
it is an A-. Growth Spiral, blue-green for an instant, a rare. Draw a card. You may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Yeah, I'd play this in all those decks.
Given where Condrix is at, I would say this card's C+, closer to a B than a C, honestly.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah, I'd go C+ as well because the ceiling's not is a little capped on it, but still. 2 more cards. Lightning Helix. They really put some heavy hitters in here. Red-white for an instant. Lightning Helix deals 3 damage to any target, and you gain 3 life. God, this card's so much better than it looks on paper, and it looks pretty sweet on paper too.
Yeah, this is an A. It's just so efficient.
So amazing. Yeah, you just can't. It's a lot like Lightning Bolt. Like when you play it in these decks, it's just that much better. A for Lightning Helix. And last card is Putrefy, 1 green-black for an instant at rare. Destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. Another very efficient removal spell. In this case, for the black-green deck. Sure, yeah. I'd give it an A- or just an A, whatever.
I like A- on Putrefy. It's just a really good, efficient removal spell.
Yeah, I mean, instant speed, unconditional. It even hits artifacts randomly. So there you go. Wow, they brought out some real heavy hitters there for the Mystical Archive, and it's going to be really interesting to get a chance to see some of really what would be the best limited cards ever. Some of the all-timers get mixed in. They're not going to be all over the place, but you'll see them occasionally. It could be interesting, like, wow, Swords to Plowshares. I'm glad they don't print that anymore. That's probably what you're going to be thinking when people fire it off, because we're just not used to that level of efficiency. Super crazy set. My God, the level of text is absurd on these things. But, as we found out, and as we predicted, by the way, for Kaldheim, that level of complexity, while difficult to get over in the beginning, can really add some serious longevity to how fun the set is to play long term. And I'm hoping for that for Strixhaven as well. That is going to do it for this one. If you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. And don't forget about our sponsor channel, Fireball, where they've got a whole lot going on over at CFB. If you went over there recently, you'll see the brand new logo and new look over at CFB, looking sharp. And you can get into box breaks. You can sell your cards back. You can buy singles. You can buy whatever. You can get CFB Pro. There's a whole lot going on over at Channel Fireball all the time. If you do end up picking up anything, do me a favor and use the affiliate code LR at checkout. It helps out the show, and we really appreciate it. If you do so, it lets them know that we sent you over. And make sure that if you want to pre-order Strixhaven, want to get your hands on some of these Mystical Archive cards, go over to Channel Fireball and you can pre-order right now. That is going to do it for this one. We'll see you next time.
So, Marshall, in case you were wondering exactly how I ended up doing so well last weekend, I had a little song.
Oh, God.
I can't get it out of my head. And honestly, I think that Magic needs more buffoonery, not less. So do I believe it was 100% skill? Of course I do. I'm one of the best players of all time. We'll see you next week.